the shadowy streets of Valthorn, a cunning magician, Elias van Holt, uncovers a deadly plot, the saffron conspiracy threatening to burn the city to ashes. With a mysterious ring as his only weapon, he battles traitors, unravels secrets, and faces a hidden mastermind, the Weaver. Joined by a grieving widow, a determined heiress, and a rival turned ally, Elias races against time to save the city, forging a legacy of courage that will inspire generations. Will he outwit the darkness? Or will Valthorn fall? Chapter 1. The curtain rises. The fog clung to London like a conspirator, its tendrils curling around the gaslit streets and muffling the clatter of hansoms and the cries of newsboys. It was the autumn of 1892, and the city pulsed with the restless energy of a metropolis teetering between Victorian propriety and the undercurrents of rebellion. In the heart of the West End, the Lyceum Theatre stood as a beacon of grandeur, its ornate facade promising spectacle to the crowds that thronged its doors. Tonight, the air buzzed with anticipation, for Alistair Vane, the most celebrated magician of the age, was to perform his signature trick, the vanishing cabinet. Sherlock Holmes, clad in his Inverness cape, stepped from a hansom cab onto the damp cobblestones, his keen eyes scanning the theatre's entrance. Beside him, Dr. John Watson adjusted his scarf against the chill, his face alight with the excitement of a rare evening's entertainment. The invitation had come unexpectedly, delivered to 221B Baker Street by a harried Inspector Lestrade, who had muttered something about a delicate matter before dashing off. Holmes, intrigued by the cryptic summons, had insisted they attend Vane's performance. "Really, Holmes," Watson said, his breath misting in the air, "you might show a bit of enthusiasm. Vane's illusions are the talk of London. They say he makes entire carriages disappear." Holmes's lips twitched in a faint smile. "Illusions, Watson, are merely truths dressed in clever disguises. I am here not for amusement, but to observe. Lestrade's urgency suggests more than a magician's sleight of hand." They joined the stream of top-hatted gentlemen and bejeweled ladies flowing into the theatre's foyer, where crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over marble floors. The crowd buzzed with speculation about Vane's latest trick, a feat said to defy the laws of nature. Watson, ever the romantic, soaked in the atmosphere, while Holmes's gaze darted from face to face, cataloguing details, a nervous twitch in a theatre usher's hand, a whispered argument between two society matrons, a man in a poorly fitted suit lingering near the cloakroom inside the auditorium. The orchestra tuned their instruments, a discordant hum rising to the gilded ceiling. Holmes and Watson settled into their seats in a private box, courtesy of Lestrade's arrangements. The box afforded a clear view of the stage, where a heavy velvet curtain shimmered in the gaslight. Watson leafed through the program, reading aloud snippets about Vane's career. Born in Bristol, trained in Paris, a master of escapology and illusion who had baffled royalty across Europe. "Fascinating," Watson murmured. "He once escaped a locked trunk submerged in the Thames." "Showmanship," Holmes replied, his eyes fixed on the stage. "The man sells wonder, Watson, but wonder is a currency easily counterfeited." The lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the audience. The orchestra struck up a haunting melody, and the curtain rose to reveal a stage bathed in crimson light. At its center stood Alistair Vane, a tall, lean figure in a tailored black suit, his dark hair swept back, his eyes gleaming with an almost predatory charisma. He raised a gloved hand, and the audience leaned forward as one. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vane's voice rang out, rich and commanding. Tonight you will witness the impossible. Tonight I shall step into the vanishing cabinet and dissolve into the ether, only to return by the will of forces unseen. Are you ready to believe? The crowd erupted in applause, but Holmes remained still, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. Watson glanced at him, noting the intensity in his friend's expression. "What is it, Holmes? A performance?" Holmes murmured, "Is a contract. He promises to return. Let us see if he keeps his word." Vane's act began with a series of dazzling tricks. Doves materialized from empty hats. A lady's necklace vanished from her throat, only to reappear in a locked box, and a mirror reflected Vane's image before shattering to reveal him standing behind it. Each feat drew gasps and cheers, but Holmes's attention was elsewhere. He studied the stagehands moving in the shadows, the subtle cues in Vane's gestures, the faint creak of the stage floor. Then came the finale. Stagehands wheeled out the vanishing cabinet, a towering structure of polished mahogany inlaid with silver runes. It stood 7 feet tall, its door carved with intricate patterns. That caught the light. Vane circled it, tapping its sides to demonstrate its solidity. "This cabinet," he declared, "is my gateway to the unknown. Once I enter, I am at the mercy of forces beyond our comprehension." Watson leaned forward, his heart quickening. "Remarkable," he whispered. "How do you suppose he does it?" "Patience, Watson," Holmes replied. "The trick is not in the vanishing, but in the reappearance." Vane opened the cabinet door, revealing an empty interior lined with black velvet. He stepped inside, his silhouette sharp against the light. "Count with me," he called to the audience. 3, 2, 1. The door slammed shut. The orchestra played a dramatic chord, and the stagehands spun the cabinet, showing all sides. A drum roll began, building to a crescendo. The door was flung open and the cabinet was empty. The audience gasped, then applauded wildly. Watson clapped, caught up in the moment, but Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Wait," he said softly. The drum roll continued, the stagehands looking too. The wings, as if expecting a signal. Seconds stretched into a minute. The crowd's cheers faltered, replaced by murmurs of confusion. The cabinet remained empty, its door yawning like a silent accusation. "Holmes," Watson whispered. "He's supposed to come back." "Indeed," Holmes said, rising from his seat. "And he has not." The orchestra faltered, and the theatre manager, a portly man in a straining waistcoat, hurried onto the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he stammered, "a slight delay, nothing more. Please remain seated." But the mood had shifted. Whispers spread like wildfire. "Where is he? Is this part of the act? Something's wrong." Holmes was already moving, his long strides carrying him from the box to the aisle. "Come, Watson," he called. "The real performance has just begun." They pushed through the crowd to the stage, where Lestrade met them, his face pale. "Holmes, thank God you're here," he said. "Vane's gone, vanished, just like he said, but he ain't come back." "Show me the cabinet," Holmes ordered. The stage was chaos, stagehands shouting, the manager wringing his hands, the audience growing restless. Holmes climbed onto the stage, his presence commanding silence from those nearby. The vanishing cabinet loomed before him, its door still open, its interior mockingly empty. Holmes circled it, his fingers brushing the wood, testing the hinges, tapping the panels. He knelt, examining the stage floor, then stood and peered inside. Locked from the inside, he noted, pointing to a latch that could only be engaged by someone within, yet no one is there. Watson joined him, peering into the cabinet. Could he have slipped out somehow? A trapdoor, perhaps. Holmes shook his head. The floor is solid, and the cabinet was elevated. Observe the dust on the stage, disturbed except by the wheels. He leaned closer, sniffing the air. A faint odor, chemicals perhaps. And this. He plucked a single saffron thread from the cabinet's edge, holding it to the light. Lestrade hovered nearby, anxious. What do you make of it, Holmes? Is it a stunt or foul play? Too early to say, Holmes replied, pocketing the thread. But a man does not build a career on spectacle only to abandon it without reason. We must search his dressing room and question the staff. The manager led them backstage through a maze of ropes and pulleys to Vane's dressing room. It was a small, cluttered space, its walls lined with posters of Vane's triumphs. The great Vane escapes the Iron Maiden. Vane defies gravity. A mirror framed with gaslights dominated one wall, its surface smudged with grease. On the table lay a deck of cards, a silk scarf, and a leather-bound journal. Holmes seized the journal, flipping through its pages. Most were filled with sketches of tricks, diagrams of mirrors, trapdoors, and hidden compartments, but one page caught his eye. It bore a single sentence, written in a hurried hand. "The trick is the truth." "Curious," Holmes murmured. A confession, a warning. Watson picked up a crumpled note tucked beneath a powder box. "Holmes, look at this." He unfolded it, revealing a few scrawled words. "Beware the saffron veil." Holmes's eyes gleamed. The saffron veil, a name, perhaps, or a symbol. It connects to the thread, I wager. Lestrade, growing impatient, interrupted. "Holmes, the audience is near rioting. If Vane's been kidnapped or worse, we need answers fast." "Then we begin at once," Holmes said. "Watson, take note of the staff's names and their accounts of the evening. Lestrade, secure the theatre. No one leaves without my inspection. I shall examine the stage further." As Watson and Lestrade dispersed, Holmes returned to the stage, his mind racing. The vanishing cabinet stood silent, its secrets locked within. He tapped its walls again, listening for hollow spaces, but found none. Kneeling, he examined the stage floor beneath it, noting a faint scratch mark, as if something heavy had been dragged. "A clue," he muttered, "but to what?" The audience's murmurs grew louder, and the manager reappeared, wringing his hands. "Mr. Holmes, we must clear the theatre. The crowd's turning ugly." Holmes nodded. "Do so, but ensure the stage remains untouched. This is now a crime scene." As the manager hurried off, Watson returned, his notebook filled with scribbled names. The stagehands saw nothing unusual, he reported. But one mentioned a rival magician, Edgar Crowley, who was in the audience tonight. "There's bad blood between him and Vane." Crowley, Holmes repeated, his eyes narrowing. "A name worth pursuing." And the note, "Beware the saffron veil." It suggests a deeper game. The theatre began to empty, the audience's frustration echoing through the halls. Holmes stood alone by the cabinet, his silhouette sharp against the crimson curtains. The case had begun, and with it, a puzzle that promised to test even his formidable mind. "Watson," he called, "we have work to do. The magician has vanished, but his trick is far from over." The night deepened, and with it, the mystery. Holmes and Watson left the Lyceum, the fog swallowing their figures as they stepped into the London streets. The vanishing cabinet, the saffron thread, the cryptic. Note all were pieces of a larger puzzle, one that Holmes was determined to solve. But for now, the stage was dark. and Alistair Vane remained a ghost in the machine of his own illusion. The case of the vanishing magician's trick had begun, and Sherlock Holmes would not rest until the curtain fell on the trut. Chapter 2. The Empty Stage. The Lyceum Theatre, emptied of its restless audience, stood in an eerie hush as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson lingered on the stage. The gas lights had been dimmed, casting long shadows that danced across the crimson curtains and the silent vanishing cabinet. The air carried the faint scent of sawdust and grease paint, undercut by something sharper, perhaps the chemical tang Holmes had noted earlier. The magician Alistair Vane's disappearance had left a void, not just in the cabinet, but in the very atmosphere of the theatre, and Holmes's keen mind was already slicing through the fog of confusion. "Watson," Holmes said, his voice low and precise, "we must treat this stage as a battlefield. Every mark, every object, is a footprint of the truth. Begin with the cabinet's interior. Look for anything out of place." Watson nodded, stepping toward the vanishing cabinet. Its mahogany surface gleamed under the faint light, the silver runes etched into its door catching the eye like whispers of the occult. He opened the door, peering into the black velvet-lined interior. "It's empty, Holmes," he called, running his hand along the walls. "No hidden panels, no levers, just nothing." Holmes, kneeling by the stage's edge, did not look up. He was examining the scratch mark he had noticed earlier, faint, curved line in the polished wood, barely visible but unmistakable to his trained eye. "Nothing, Watson, is rarely nothing," he murmured. "The absence of evidence is itself a clue. What does an empty cabinet tell us? That Vane truly vanished?" Watson ventured, half in jest. Holmes's lips twitched. "Or that he was never meant to stay. Come, assist me here." Watson joined him, crouching beside the scratch mark. Holmes traced it with a gloved finger, noting its arc and depth. "This was made recently," he said. "Something heavy was dragged across the stage, likely during or just before the performance. The cabinet's wheels are rubber-lined. They would not mark the wood. This suggests another object or person moved in haste. Could it be part of the trick?" Watson asked. "A prop, perhaps?" "Possibly," Holmes replied, rising. "But the stagehands would have noticed such a movement during the show. No, this mark is an anomaly, and anomalies are the threads by which we unravel mysteries." He turned his attention to the stage's perimeter, moving with the deliberate grace of a predator. The boards creaked faintly under his weight, and he paused, tapping the floor with his cane. "Listen, Watson. The stage is hollow in places standard for trapdoors and machinery. We must find if one was used." They searched, methodically, Holmes tapping and listening, Watson following with a notebook to jot down observations. Near the back of the stage, beneath the coiled rope, Holmes's cane elicited a dull thud. He knelt, brushing away sawdust to reveal a faint seam in the wood. "Here," he said, pressing along the edge. A panel shifted, revealing a trapdoor just wide enough for a man to pass through. Watson peered into the dark space below. "A way out?" he asked. "Could Vane have slipped through during the trick?" Holmes produced a small electric torch from his pocketer. Recent acquisition, he was rather proud of, and shone it into the void. The beam illuminated a narrow ladder descending to a dusty crawlspace filled with pulleys and ropes. "Possible," he said, "but unlikely. The cabinet was elevated, and the trapdoor is 10 feet away. To reach it undetected, Vane would have needed an accomplice to distract the audience and stagehands. Yet the scratch mark suggests movement toward the cabinet, not away. He climbed down, motioning for Watson to follow. The crawl space was cramped, the air thick with dust. Holmes swept the torch across the floor, noting footprints too many to isolate one set. Theatre staff, he muttered, sloppy. But here he pointed to a smudge of grease near the ladder's base. This is fresh. Someone descended recently, perhaps tonight. Watson frowned. If Vane used this trapdoor, where did he go? There's no exit here. Precisely, Holmes said, his eyes gleaming. A dead end, yet used. Why? To hide. Something, perhaps, or to mislead us. He climbed back to the stage, brushing dust from his coat. We must examine the cabinet's mechanism more closely. Its lock intrigues me. They returned to the cabinet, where Holmes inspected the internal latch. It was a simple bolt, designed to be engaged from within, yet it was firmly in place. Curious, he said. If Vane locked himself in, how did he exit without unlocking it? And if someone else locked it, how did they do so without being seen? Watson rubbed his chin. A duplicate key. Holmes shook his head. The latch is internal, Watson. No keyhole. The answer lies in the cabinet's Dyson. In what? We are not seeing. He stepped back, circling the structure, his fingers brushing the runes. These markings are decorative, but precise. They may conceal a seam or panel. As Holmes worked, Inspector Lestrade reappeared, his face flushed. Holmes, the staff are getting antsy. I've got their statements, but they're a muddle. Most swear they saw nothing odd, though one lad mentioned a cloaked figure lingering near the stage door before the show. A cloaked figure, Holmes repeated, his interest piqued. Description. Vague, Lestrade admitted. Tall, hooded, moved quick. The lad thought it was a toff sneaking in for a free show. Or someone with a purpose, Holmes said. Have the stage door watched, Lestrade. No one enters or leaves without inspection. He turned to Watson. We must speak with the theatre manager. He knows more than he's let on. The manager, Mr. Percival Hodge, was in his office, a cluttered room off the foyer. He was a stout man with a florid face, his waistcoat straining as he paced. Mr. Holmes, this is a disaster, he cried. Vane's disappearance will ruin us. The papers will have a field day. Calm yourself, Mr. Hodge, Holmes said, seating himself in a creaking chair. Tell me about Vane, his habits, his enemies, his recent behaviour. Hodge mopped his brow. Alistair Vane was a genius, but a difficult one, demanding, secretive, always tinkering with his props. He insisted on inspecting the cabinet himself before every show, said he didn't trust anyone. Interesting, Holmes said. And his enemies? Hodge hesitated. Well, there's Edgar Crowley, another magician. Used to be Vane's mentor, but they fell out years ago. Crowley claimed Vane stole his tricks. He's been at Vane's throat ever since, spreading rumors, trying to upstage him. Crowley was in the audience tonight, Watson interjected, recalling the stagehand's comment. Hodge nodded. Aye, he was. Front row, bold as brass, probably gloating. Holmes leaned forward, his eyes piercing. Did Vane seem anxious before the performance? Any unusual visitors? Hodge fidgeted. He was edgy, I'll admit, kept to himself more than usual. And yesterday, a woman came to see him, dressed in mourning, veiled. They are enough, I heard it through the door. Couldn't make out the words, but Vane was shaken after. A woman in mourning, Holmes mused. Did she give a name? No, sir. She left quick, and Vane wouldn't talk about it. Holmes stood, his mind racing. "Thank you, Mr. Hodge. Ensure the cabinet remains untouched. Watson, we must see Vane's dressing room again." They returned to the small, cluttered space, where the gaslights cast flickering shadows over the posters and props. Holmes resumed his search, his movements swift but meticulous. He rifled through the journal again, pausing at a sketch of the vanishing cabinet. The diagram showed its dimensions, and a note in Vane's hand. "Mirror alignment critical. Check angles." Mirrors, Holmes said. A classic illusionist's tool. But the cabinet had none visible, perhaps hidden. Watson picked up the crumpled note he'd found earlier, rereading it. "Beware the saffron veil," he said. "It sounds ominous, Holmes. A cult, perhaps." "Or a distraction," Holmes replied, examining the mirror on the dressing table. He tilted it, noting a faint scratch on its frame. "This mirror has been moved recently. Help me shift it." Together, they lifted the heavy mirror from the wall, revealing a small alcove behind it. Inside was a velvet pouch containing a single item, a brass key, its head shaped like a crescent moon. "A key," Watson said, excited. "To the cabinet." Holmes examined it, turning it in the light. "No, the cabinet's latch is internal. This is for something else, a lock we've yet to find." He pocketed the key, his expression thoughtful. The saffron veil, a cloaked figure, a woman in mourning, and now this key. The threads are multiplying, Watson. They continued their search, Holmes sifting through Vane's belongings with surgical precision. Beneath a pile of silk scarves, he found a playbill from a rival theatre featuring Edgar Crowley's name in bold letters. A date was circled to night's performance and a single word was scrawled beside it: watch. Crowley was on Vane's mind, Holmes said. A rival, a threat, or a decoy. We must visit him at once. As they prepared to leave, a stagehand burst in, breathless. "Mr. Holmes, we found something under the stage, near the trapdoor." They hurried back, descending into the crawl space. The stagehand pointed to a small, locked box tucked behind a pulley. Its surface was scratched, as if dragged the source of the mark on the stage above. Holmes examined the box, noting a crescent-shaped keyhole. He produced the key from Vane's dressing room and inserted it. The lock clicked, and the lid sprang open, revealing a bundle of letters tied with a saffron ribbon. Holmes untied them, scanning the first. It was written in a precise hand, addressed to Vane. "Your secrets are not yours alone. The veil sees all. Meet us at the docks, midnight, or the truth will be your final act." "The saffron veil," Watson whispered. They were threatening him. Holmes's eyes gleamed. Blackmail, perhaps, or a lure. "The docks at midnight, too late for tonight, but we shall investigate tomorrow." He tucked the letters into his coat. "For now, we pursue Crowley." His presence tonight was no coincidence. They emerged from the theatre into the fog-choked streets, the city's pulse a distant hum. Holmes hailed a hansom cab, his mind already mapping the next move. "To Crowley's residence, Watson," he said as they climbed in. "The empty stage has spoken, but the magician's rival may yet reveal more." The cab rattled off, carrying them deeper into the mystery. The vanishing cabinet, the saffron thread, the cryptic letters, all were pieces of a puzzle that grew more intricate by the hour. Alistair Vane had vanished, but Sherlock Holmes was closing in on the truth, one shadow at a time. Chapter 3. The magician's rivaled a hansom cab clattered through London's fog-shrouded streets. its wheels rattling over cobblestones as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson sped toward the residence of Edgar Crowley, Alistair Vane's rival. The night was thick with mist, the gaslights casting feeble halos that barely pierced the gloom. Inside the cab, Holmes sat in silence, his sharp features illuminated by the occasional flicker of a passing lamp. His fingers toyed with the saffron thread from the vanishing cabinet, his mind weaving connections between the cryptic letters, the crescent key, and the name that now loomed large in their investigation. Crowley, Watson, seated opposite, clutched his notebook, his thoughts still on the theatre's empty stage. "Holmes," he ventured, "do you truly believe Crowley is behind Vane's disappearance? A rival magician, perhaps, but a criminal." Holmes's eyes glinted. "Motive, Watson, is the skeleton of any crime. Crowley's enmity with Vane is well-documented professional jealousy, accusations of theft. If Vane's vanishing was no accident, Crowley stands to gain. But we must not assume. We observe, we deduce, we prove." The cab slowed as it entered a quieter corner of Bloomsbury, where Georgian townhouses stood shoulder to shoulder, their windows dark. At the end of a narrow street, a single house glowed with light, its brass knocker gleaming like a challenge. The driver reined in the horses, and Holmes leaped out, tossing him a coin. "Wait here," he instructed, then strode toward the door. Watson hurrying to keep pace. The nameplate read, "E. Crowley, Illusionist." Holmes rapped sharply, the sound echoing in the still night. Moments later, the door swung open, revealing a wiry manservant with a pinched face. "Yes," he said, eyeing them warily. "Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson," Holmes announced. "We must speak with Mr. Crowley at once. It concerns Alistair Vane." The servant's expression tightened, but he stepped aside. "This way, sirs." They were led through a foyer adorned with theatrical posters, each proclaiming Crowley's triumphs. Crowley conjures the impossible, the master of mystique. The air carried the faint scent of incense, mingled with the metallic Thames of stage chemicals. The servant ushered them into a parlour that seemed more stage than home. Velvet drapes framed tall windows, and a chandelier cast flickering light over a collection of oddities. A crystal ball, a gilded cage housing a mechanical bird, a table strewn with tarot cards and glass vials. Edgar Crowley stood by a roaring fireplace, a glass of brandy in hand. He was a striking figure, shorter than Vane, but exuding a theatrical intensity. His hair was jet black, slicked back, and his eyes, a piercing green, sparkled with a mix of amusement and defiance. He wore a silk dressing gown embroidered with silver stars, and a heavy signet ring glinted on his right hand. "Mr. Holmes," he said, his voice smooth as velvet, "and Dr. Watson, to what do I owe the pleasure, or should I say, the intrusion?" Holmes wasted no time. "Alistair Vane vanished tonight during his performance at the Lyceum. You were in the audience, Mr. Crowley. I wish to know why." Crowley's smile was a blade. "To see my rival outshine me, of course. Vane's tricks are the talk of London. I'm a professional, Mr. Holmes. I study my competition." "Competition," Holmes repeated, his tone cool. "Or obsession. You've accused Vane of stealing your illusions. A man with such a grudge might wish to see his rival disappear permanently." Crowley laughed, a sharp theatrical sound. "You think me a villain, do you? I'm flattered, but I assure you I had no hand in Vane's little stunt. If he's truly gone, perhaps he's pulled his greatest trick yet, fooling even the great Sherlock Holmes." Watson bristled, but Holmes remained unruffled. He stepped closer, his gaze locking onto Crowley's. You were seen in the front row, watching intently. A stagehand reported a cloaked figure near the stage door before the show. Tall, hooded. You are not tall, Mr. Crowley, but you are resourceful. An accomplice, perhaps. Crowley's smile faltered, but only for a moment. You weave a fine tale, Mr. Holmes, but you've no proof. I was in my seat all evening, as dozens can attest. As for cloaked figures, London is full of shadows. Why not chase them all? Holmes's eyes flicked to the signet ring, its crest a stylized serpent. Your ring, he said. Distinctive. A stagehand mentioned a similar one on the cloaked figure. Care to explain? Crowley's hand twitched, but he recovered quickly. A common design among showmen, Mr. Holmes. Serpents symbolize mystery, transformation. Vane himself wore one, did he not? Did he not? Did he? Holmes said softly. I shall verify that. For now, tell me about the saffron veil. The room seemed to still. Crowley's glass paused halfway to his lips, and the fire's crackle grew louder in the silence. The saffron veil, he said at last, his tone guarded. A fanciful name. I've heard whispers a secret society, dabbling in mysticism, illusions, power. Vane was rumoured to be involved, but I know little more. Such groups thrive on secrecy, not publicity. Yet you know enough to mention them, Holmes pressed. Vane received a letter threatening exposure by the saffron veil. If he was entangled with them, what might they want from him? Crowley shrugged, but his eyes darted to the table where a smudged ticket stub lay among the tarot cards. Vane was a man of secrets, he said. Perhaps he crossed the wrong people. But I'm no gossip, Mr. Holmes. If you want answers, look to his allies, not his rivals. Holmes followed Crowley's glance, noting the ticket stub. He crossed to the table, picking it up with a casual air. It was for a steamer departing from the East India docks tomorrow night, destination unspecified. Planning a trip, Mr. Crowley? He asked. Crowley's jaw tightened. A professional engagement. Nothing more. Of course, Holmes said, pocketing the stub. We shall not detain you further, but I advise you to remain in London. Mr. Crowley, I may have more questions. Crowley's smile returned, thin and cold. I am at your service, Mr. Holmes, but a word of caution. Vane's world is one of mirrors and smoke. Don't lose yourself in it. The servant showed them out, and the door closed with a heavy thud. In the cab, Watson exhaled. Arrogant devil, he muttered. He's hiding something, Holmes. Undoubtedly, Holmes replied, examining the ticket stub. This stub is for a dockside warehouse, not a steamer. Crowley lied a small lie, but revealing. He's connected to the docks, and the letters we found mentioned a meeting there. We must investigate at first light. The cab rattled back toward Baker Street, but Holmes's mind was elsewhere. He drew the saffron thread from his pocket, twirling it between his fingers. Crowley's ring, he mused, the serpent design, is not common, despite his claim, and his mention of the saffron veil was too precise to be idle gossip. He knows more than he admits, but is he the puppet or the puppeteer? At 2-1 the fire was low, and Mrs. Hudson had left a tray of tea and biscuits. Watson sank into his armchair, weary but alert. What's our next move, Holmes? Holmes lit his pipe, the smoke curling like the fog outside. We have 3 threads, the saffron veil, the docks, and Crowley's role. Tomorrow We visit the East India Docks to trace the warehouse from Crowley's stub. We also need Vanes. Associates his stagehands, his manager, perhaps this woman in mourning, and we must decipher the letter's code, if there is one. Watson opened his notebook, flipping to the page where he'd copied the threatening letter. Your secrets are not yours alone, he read. The veil sees all. Meet us at the docks, midnight, or the truth will be your final act. He frowned. It's blackmail, surely, but what secrets? Holmes puffed on his pipe. Vane's journal mentioned mirror alignments. His tricks rely on precision, but so does his life, it seems. The saffron veil may be a society of illusionists, or something darker, criminal syndicate cloaked in mysticism. Vane's disappearance could be flight, deception, or murder. We need more data. The clock struck 2, and Watson stifled it. Yawn, you'll sit up all night, won't you? Holmes smiled faintly. Sleep is a luxury, Watson. The stage is set, and the magician's rival has played his opening move. Tomorrow, we counter. As Watson retired, Holmes spread the letters on the table, their saffron ribbons glowing in the lamplight. He began to read, his mind a scalpel, cutting through the layers of deceit. The case of the vanishing magician's trick was deepening, and Sherlock Holmes was ready to pull back the curtain. Chapter 4. Shadows at the docks. The dawn broke over London with a sullen glow, the fog of the previous night giving way to a damp, grey morning that clung to the city like a shroud. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson stepped from a hansom cab at the East India Docks, where the Thames churned with sluggish menace. The air was thick with the briny temps of river water, mingled with coal smoke and the sharp bite of tar. Warehouses loomed like silent sentinels, their brick facades stained by years of soot and spray, while dock workers shouted over the creak of cranes and the splash of barges. Holmes, clad in a dark overcoat, held the smudged ticket stub from Edgar Crowley's parlour, his eyes scanning the waterfront. The stub, misleadingly labelled for a steamer, had led them to a specific warehouse, number 17, a squat, iron-doored structure nestled between towering stacks of crates. "This is no coincidence, Watson," Holmes said, his voice cutting through the morning clamour. "Crowley's lie about a professional engagement points us here, and the letters from Vane's box mentioned a midnight meeting at the docks. We are close to the heart of the matter." Watson adjusted his hat, his revolver a comforting weight in his coat pocket. If Vane was blackmailed by this saffron veil, could they have lured him here, or worse, disposed of him? Holmes's lips twitched in a faint smile. "Speculation, Watson, is a trap. Let the evidence speak." He gestured toward the warehouse. "Come, we must be thorough but discreet. The docks are a hive of eyes and ears." They approached warehouse 17, its door secured with a rusted padlock. Holmes knelt, examining the lock with a small magnifying glass. "Recently used," he noted, pointing to fresh scratches around the keyhole. "The rust is disturbed, and there's a faint oil residues. Someone maintains this lock despite its appearance." Watson glanced around, noting the dock workers hauling barrels nearby. "Can we get inside without drawing attention?" Holmes produced a set of lockpicks from his pocket, his fingers moving with practiced precision. "A simple tumbler lock," he murmured. "Child's play." Within moments, the padlock clicked open, and Holmes eased the door ajar, slipping inside with Watson close behind. The interior was a cavern of shadows, lit only by slivers of light-piercing cracked skylights. Crates and barrels lined the walls, their surfaces dusted with grime. The air was heavy with the scent of damp wood and something sharper chemicals, perhaps like those Holmes had detected in the vanishing cabinet. A narrow path wound through the clutter, leading to a cleared space at the warehouse's center. Holmes moved silently, his electric torch casting a thin beam across the floor. "Footprints," he said, kneeling to inspect a patchwork of tracks in the dust. Multiple sets boots, some heavy, others lighter, recent, within the last day. And here he pointed to a smudge of red wax, hardened on the floor. Candle drippings. A meeting took place, likely at night. Watson peered over his shoulder. The Saffron Vale's midnight gathering. "Possibly," Holmes replied, pocketing a flake of the wax. He rose, sweeping the torch across the cleared space. At its center stood a makeshift table, strewn with papers, glass vials, and a collection of theatrical props, mirrors, coils of rope, a folded silk backdrop painted with stars. "Stagecraft," Holmes said. "Vane's trade, or someone mimicking it." He approached the table, sifting through the papers. Most were invoices for chemicals, sulfur, potassium nitrate, magnesium powder, common in stage illusions for flashes and smoke. But one document caught his eye, a coded ledger, its pages filled with numbers and cryptic symbols. "This is no mere prop list," Holmes said, tracing a line of figures. "These are transactions, disguised, dates, amounts, initials. Vane was involved in something beyond magic." Watson leaned in, squinting at the ledger. "Blackmail, as the letters suggested, or smuggling." Holmes tucked the ledger into his coat. "We shall decipher it later. For now, observe the vials." He lifted one, sniffing its contents. Ether diluted, used in small doses for stage effects or to subdue a man. His eyes narrowed. Vane's disappearance may not have been voluntary. As they searched, a faint creak echoed from the warehouse's rear. Holmes snapped off the torch, plunging them into near darkness. Watson's hand went to his revolver, his pulse quickening. "Someone's here," he whispered. Holmes motioned for silence, creeping toward the sound. The path led to a stack of crates, behind which a narrow door stood ajar, leading to an alley. Before they could investigate, a shadow moved swift, cloaked and hooded. "Stop," Holmes called, lunging forward. The figure bolted, but not before knocking over a crate, spilling bolts of saffron-colored fabric across the floor. Holmes gave chase, Watson at his heels, but the alley was a maze of barrels and netting. The figure vanished into the fog, leaving only the echo of footsteps. Holmes halted, breathing steady despite the sprint. "No matter," he said, returning to the spilled fabric. He plucked a thread from the pile, comparing it to the one from the vanishing cabinet. "Identical," he confirmed. "Saffron, tightly woven, ceremonial in quality. The veil is here, Watson." Watson caught his breath, scanning the alley. They were watching us. But why flee? "Fear," Holmes said, "or strategy. They know we're close." He re-entered the warehouse, examining the fallen crate. Inside, beneath more fabric, was a small brass box, its lid engraved with a serpent crestally similar to Crowley's signet ring. Holmes opened it, revealing a single item, a torn photograph of a young woman, her face half obscured, but her eyes wide with fear. "Who is she?" Watson asked. Holmes studied the image, his expression unreadable. A piece of the puzzle. Vane's secrets are not just his own, it seems. He pocketed the photograph and the brass box. "We've learned enough for now. The ledger, the fabric, the photograph will point to a conspiracy. But we're not alone here." As if on cue, a low whistle sounded from the alley, followed by the thud of boots. Holmes grabbed Watson's arm, pulling him behind a stack of barrels. Moments later, 3 figures entered the warehouse, masked, clad in dark cloaks, their movements purposeful. One carried a lantern, its light revealing glints of metal at their belts' knives. Perhaps, or worse. "Search the table," one hissed, his voice muffled by a scarf. "The ledger's gone." "He was here," Holmes whispered to Watson. "Stay low, we listen." The men rummaged through the props, cursing under their breath. "The Vale won't like this," another said. "Vane's papers were our leverage. If Holmes has them, he's just a man," the first snapped. "Find the box. The girl's picture is our hold over him." Watson's grip tightened on his revolver, but Holmes's hand stayed him. The men, finding nothing, moved to the rear door, their lantern fading into the alley. Holmes waited until their footsteps were gone before standing. "We've stirred the hornet's nest," he said. "The Saffron Vale is not a myth, and they fear our interference." They slipped out of the warehouse, relocking the door to cover their tracks. The docks were busier now, with stevedores unloading ships and gulls screeching overhead. Holmes hailed a cab, his mind racing. "To Baker Street," he told the driver. "We must analyze our findings before the Vale strikes again." In the cab, Watson examined the photograph, its torn edge jagged. "This girl," he said. "She's linked to Vane, isn't she?" "A lover, a sister, or a victim," Holmes replied, studying the ledger's coded pages. "The initials here, AV for Vane, perhaps, and others, ECCH. Crowley may be EC, but we need more. The transactions suggest payments, possibly extortion. Vane was either predator or prey. At 2-to-1B, the fire roared, and Mrs. Hudson brought tea, her face creased with worry at their disheveled state. Holmes spread the ledger, photograph, and brass box on the table, his pipe sending curls of smoke toward the ceiling. The warehouse was a meeting place, he said, but also a storehouse for Vane's secrets. The Vale wanted that ledger. Why? What truth does it hold? Watson sipped his tea, his mind on the masked men. They mentioned leverage, the photograph, the ledger, their tools of control. But control over whom? Holmes tapped the photograph. "This girl is key. Her fear suggests coercion. We must identify her." And the box's crest, Crowley's ring, bore a similar serpent. "He's entwined with the Vale, whether as member or manipulator." He opened the ledger, decoding its symbols with a pencil. The numbers align with dates recent, within months. The amounts are substantial, paid to a V from various initials. Vane was collecting money, but the Vale's letter threatened exposure. He may have been blackmailing them, or they him. Watson frowned. And the warehouse? Why stage props? "Illusionists thrive on misdirection," Holmes said. "The props mask their true purpose, perhaps smuggling, perhaps ritual. The chemicals suggest more than stagecraft. They could be used for harm. We need Vane's journal to cross-reference these dates." Holmes retrieved the journal from the theatre evidence, flipping to the mirror sketches. Vane was meticulous, he said. His tricks were his life, but his life was a trick. The docks, the Vale, the girl are part of his final act. The clock struck noon, and Watson stifled a yawn. "What now, Holmes?" "Back to Crowley." "Not yet," Holmes said. "Crowley expects us to return, which means he's prepared. We visit the docks again tonight, after dark, to catch the Vales." "Next move?" and we must trace this girl. Her identity may unlock the ledger's secrets. As Watson nodded, Holmes lit a fresh pipe, his eyes distant. The shadows of the docks had revealed much, but the saffron veil remained elusive, its motives cloaked. In mystery, Alistair Vane's disappearance was no mere trick, it was a web of deceit, and Sherlock Holmes was determined to cut through its threads. Chapter 5. The order unveiled. The afternoon light filtered through the grimy windows of 2-1B Baker Street, casting long shadows across the cluttered sitting room where Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson sat surrounded by the evidence of their investigation. The air was thick with tobacco smoke, Holmes's pipe working overtime as he pored over the coded ledger from the dockside warehouse. The torn photograph of the frightened young woman lay on the table beside the brass box with its serpent crest, the saffron thread, and Alistair Vane's journal. Each item was a piece of the puzzle, but the picture remained maddeningly incomplete. The saffron veil, mentioned in the threatening letter and whispered about by Edgar Crowley, loomed like a spectre over the case, and Holmes was determined to drag it into the light. Watson, nursing a cup of tea, broke the silence. "Holmes, we've got a ledger full of codes, a photograph of a girl we can't identify, and a secret society that seems to scare even Crowley. Where do we start?" Holmes set down his pipe, his eyes gleaming with the intensity of a hawk spotting prey. "We start, Watson, by understanding our enemy. The saffron veil is no mere theatrical flourish, it's a structured organization, disciplined enough to threaten Vane and bold enough to operate under London's nose. We must learn its nature, its members, and its purpose. To do that, we need information beyond what Crowley or the docks can provide." He rose, crossing to a bookshelf crammed with volumes on every subject from botany to criminal law. His fingers danced over the spines before pulling out a slim, leather-bound tome titled Secret Societies of the British Isles. "Mrs. Hudson despairs of my library," he said, flipping through the pages, "but it has its uses." Watson joined him, peering over his shoulder. "You think the saffron veil is documented?" "Unlikely by name," Holmes replied, "but patterns repeat. Secret societies, whether mystical, criminal, or political, leave traces in their rituals and symbols. The saffron thread, the serpent crest, the coded ledger, these suggest a group with theatrical leanings, perhaps masquerading as a mystical order to cloak baser motives." He paused at a chapter on Victorian esoteric societies, his finger tracing a passage about the Order of the Golden Dawn, a group known for its occult practices. "The Golden Dawn uses ceremonial robes, coded texts, and symbolic imagery," he read aloud. "But their focus is spiritual, not criminal. The saffron veil, by contrast, engages in blackmail and possibly violence. We need a source closer to the underbelly of London's occult scene." Watson frowned. "Who? Crowley won't talk, and the warehouse men were massed." Holmes snapped the book shut. "We need a guide to the fringes, Watson. Someone who knows the whispers of London's secret circles without being entangled in them. I have just the man in mind, Silas Moore, a former antiquarian turned informant. He trades in rare books and rarer secrets. If the saffron veil has a footprint, Moore will know it." They donned their coats and hailed a cab to Whitechapel, where Moore kept a dusty shop tucked between a pawn shop and a gin palace. The streets were alive with the clamour of costermongers and the wail of street musicians, the air sharp with the scent of fried fish and unwashed bodies. Moore's shop, marked by a faded sign reading Moore's Curiosities, was a narrow sliver of a building, its windows obscured by stacks of books and occult trinkets. Inside, the shop was a labyrinth of shelves, groaning under the weight of manuscripts, crystal skulls, and astrological charts. Silas Moore, a stooped man with wire-rimmed spectacles and a mane of white hair, looked up from a ledger as they entered. "Mr. Holmes," he said, his voice raspy but warm. "A rare visit. And Dr. Watson, too. What brings you to my humble den?" Holmes wasted no time. "The saffron veil, Moore. What do you know of it?" Moore's eyes widened, and he glanced toward the door as if expecting eavesdroppers. "A dangerous name to speak aloud," he said, lowering his voice. "The saffron veil is a shadow, even among shadows. Not your typical occult dabblers, they're organized, ruthless. Word is, they blend stagecraft with crime, using illusions to mask their dealings. Smuggling, extortion, even murder, if the price is right." Watson leaned forward, intrigued. "And their members, who leads them?" Moore hesitated, adjusting his spectacles. "No one knows their leader, not by name. They call him the Hierophant, a nod to tarot. Members wear saffron robes in their rituals, and they're fanatical about secrecy. I've heard they recruit from the theatrical world magicians, actors, prop makers." Alistair Vane's name has come up more than once. Holmes's expression sharpened. Vane was involved with them. "Up to his neck, if rumors are true," Moore said. "He joined a few years back, thinking it was a lark away to learn new tricks. But the veil doesn't let go easy. They used his skills, his fame, to pull off jobs. Word is, Vane tried to break free, and they didn't take kindly to it." Holmes produced the threatening letter, sliding it across the counter. "This was found among Vane's effects. It mentions a meeting at the docks and a final act. What can you tell us?" Moore read the letter, his hands trembling slightly. "This is their style-veiled threats, theatrical phrasing. The docks are a favorite haunt. They've got a warehouse there, number 17, where they store props and other things. The final act could mean anything, attribution, a ritual, or worse." "We've been to the warehouse," Holmes said, noting Moore's surprise. "We found a ledger, props, and a photograph of a young woman. The veil was there, masked and armed. They spoke of leverage and secrets." Moore paled. "You're in deep, Mr. Holmes. That ledger likely a record of their dealings. The veil keeps tabs on everyone, members, victims, even rivals. As for the girl..." He hesitated, then reached beneath the counter, pulling out a tattered newspaper clipping. "This might help." The clipping, dated a year ago, described the disappearance of Emily Harwood, a young heiress last seen at a charity gala. The accompanying sketch matched the torn photograph from the warehouse. Same wide eyes, same delicate features. Emily Harwood, Moore said. Her vanishing caused a stir, then faded. Some say she ran off, others that she was taken. If the veil has her picture, she's tied to Vane or their schemes. Holmes studied the clipping, his mind racing. "A connection," he murmured. "Vane, the veil, and now Emily Harwood. The ledger may hold the key to her fate." He turned to Moore. "Where does the veil meet next? We need to observe them." Moore shook his head. "They're ghosts, Mr. Holmes. Their meetings move warehouses, abandoned churches, even private. Holmes, but there's talk of a gathering tonight near Spitalfields, an old chapel, deconsecrated, used for their rituals. I don't know the exact address, but it's marked by a saffron ribbon on the gate." Holmes pocketed the clipping. You've been most helpful, Moore. If the veil contacts you, say nothing of our visit. Moore nodded, his eyes uneasy. Be careful, Mr. Holmes. The veil doesn't forgive. Back in the cab, Watson clutched the newspaper clipping, his mind on Emily Harwood. If Vane was involved with her disappearance, it explains the veil's threats. But why keep her photograph? Leverage, Holmes said, lighting his pipe. The veil thrives on control. Emily may be a pawn or a ghost, haunting Vane's conscience. Tonight, we infiltrate their meeting. We need to see the veil in action, to understand their hierarchy and Vane's role. The day passed in a blur of preparation. Holmes deciphered more of the ledger, identifying payments linked to theatrical suppliers and dockside shipments, suggesting the veil smuggled goods under the guise of stage props. Watson, meanwhile, studied Vane's journal, noting references to a final performance scheduled for tonight, the same night as the veil's rumoured gathering, as dusk fell. They set out for Spitalfields, dressed in dark, nondescript clothing, to blend with the East End's crowds. The old chapel was easy to find, its gate marked by a fluttering saffron ribbon. The building was a crumbling relic, its stained glass windows boarded up, its spire leaning like a drunken sentinel. Holmes and Watson slipped through an alley, finding a broken window at the chapel's rear. Inside, the air was damp and heavy with the scent of wax and incense. Flickering candlelight revealed a circle of figures in saffron robes, their faces hidden by hoods. At the center stood a tall man in a black robe, his voice resonant as he spoke of the final vanishing and a traitor among us. Holmes, crouched behind a pew, whispered to Watson, the Hierophant, perhaps. Note the cadence-trained, theatrical. The ritual was a blend of mysticism and showmanship, chants, symbolic gestures, the passing of a serpent-embossed chalice. But the words carried weight references to Vane's betrayal, a stolen secret, and a plan to cleanse the veil. Holmes's eyes narrowed as a robed figure stepped forward, holding a dagger. The traitor's time is near, the figure said. His performance ends tonight. Watson's hand twitched toward his revolver, but Holmes stayed him. Not yet, he mouthed. They listened as the Hierophant dismissed the group, ordering them to secure the docks and retrieve the girl's truth. The figures dispersed, leaving the chapel empty save for the lingering smoke of extinguished candles. Holmes rose, inspecting the altar. A ritual book lay open, its pages filled with diagrams of illusions, mirrors, trapdoors, chemical formulae, with cryptic phrases about transcending the veil. He tore out a page, tucking it into his coat. This confirms it, he said. The veil uses stagecraft as a mask for crime. Vane's skills were their tool, but he turned against them. Watson examined the chalice, noting its serpent crest. Crowley's ring again, he said. He's one of them, isn't he? Or a rival using their symbols, Holmes replied. We need more. The docks, the girl, the final performance, they converge tonight. We return to the warehouse, but first we trace Emily Harwood's last movements. Her family may know more. They slipped out of the chapel, the night swallowing their footsteps. The saffron veil was no longer a rumour, it was a living, breathing threat, and Alistair Vane's disappearance was its centrepiece. Holmes's mind burned with possibilities, each clue a thread in a tapestry of deceit. The order had been unveiled, but its secrets were far from exposed, and Sherlock Holmes would not rest until the curtain fell. Chapter 6. The lady in Mourning the Fog had returned to London. wrapping the city in a clammy embrace as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson stepped from their cab onto the cobbled street of Belgravia. The gaslights flickered, casting pools of light that barely reached the grand facades of the townhouses lining the square. It was late afternoon, the day after their infiltration of the Saffron Vale's ritual in Patel Fields, and the weight of the case pressed heavily on them. The torn photograph of Emily Harwood, the coded ledger, and the ritual book's cryptic references to a final vanishing had pointed them toward a new lead, the Harwood family, whose missing heiress seemed entwined with Alistair Vane's fate. But before they could pursue that thread, an unexpected visitor had arrived at 2-1B Baker Street, demanding their attention. Holmes, his sharp eyes scanning the street for any sign of pursuit, led Watson to a discreet corner where a veiled woman waited, her figure shrouded in black mourning attire. She had sent a note an hour earlier, requesting a meeting on urgent terms, and Holmes, sensing a connection to the theatre manager's mention of a woman in mourning arguing with Vane, had agreed to meet her here, away from prying eyes. "Stay alert, Watson," Holmes murmured, his voice low. "She may be an ally or a trap. The Saffron Vale has eyes everywhere." Watson nodded, his hand resting near the revolver in his coat pocket. The woman turned as they approached, her veil obscuring her face, though her posture was rigid with determination. "Mr. Holmes," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Dr. Watson, thank you for coming. I am Clara Vane, Alistair's sister. I need your help." Holmes's expression remained impassive, but his mind raced. "Miss Vane," he said, stepping closer, "your brother's disappearance is the subject of our investigation. Why seek us out now, and why here?" Clara lifted her veil slightly, revealing a pale face framed by dark curls, her eyes red-rimmed but resolute. "I cannot trust the police, Mr. Holmes. Alistair warned me of danger before his final performance. He feared for his life, and now he's gone. I believe he's alive, but in peril. You are my only hope." Watson, ever the gentleman, softened at her distress. "We're doing all we can, Miss Vane, but we need to know more. What danger did your brother fear?" Clara glanced around, her hands twisting a lace handkerchief. "Not here. There's a tea shop nearby, private enough. Please." Holmes nodded, sensing her sincerity but wary of deception. They followed her to a small, dimly lit tea shop, its windows steamed from the warmth within. A corner table offered seclusion, and after ordering tea, Clara began her story, her voice low to avoid the ears of the few other patrons. "Alistair and I were close as children," she said, "but his career took him across Europe, and we grew apart. He was always secretive, obsessed with his craft. 2 months ago, he wrote to me, urging me to visit London. He said he'd made enemies. He mentioned a group, the Saffron Vale, and said they were using his skills for something unspeakable." Holmes leaned forward, his eyes piercing. "What skills, and what unspeakable acts?" Clara hesitated, sipping her tea to steady herself. Alistair was a genius at illusion, mirrors, trapdoors, chemicals. He could make anything vanish. But he hinted at jobs beyond the stage smuggling, perhaps, or worse. He said the veil forced him to create illusions for their crimes, disguising thefts, even abductions. He wanted out, but they threatened him. Watson exchanged a glance with Holmes, recalling the ledger's coded transactions and the warehouse. "Props, did he name anyone?" Watson asked. "A leader, perhaps. The Hierophant." Clara shook her head. "No names, only the veil. but he was terrified. The night before his performance, I visited him at the Lyceum. We argued. I begged him to flee, but he refused. He said he had a plan, a final trick to expose the veil. Then he gave me this. She reached into her reticule, producing a small silver locket, its surface engraved with a delicate rose. Holmes took the locket, opening it to reveal a tiny photograph of a young woman, Emily Harwood, identical to the torn image from the warehouse. "Who is she?" he asked, though he already suspected the answer. Clara's voice trembled. He wouldn't say, only that she was someone he'd wronged, someone the veil had hurt. He said her memory drove him to act. I think she's why he risked everything." Holmes pocketed the locket, his mind cataloguing the connection. "Miss Vane, your brother's journal mentions a final performance tonight. The veil's ritual spoke of a traitor and a cleansing. Do you know where Alistair might be?" Clara's eyes filled with tears. "No, but he mentioned the docks often said they were the veil's stronghold. He also spoke of a chapel in a place of secrets. I fear he's hiding, or worse, captured." Holmes stood, his decision made. "Thank you, Miss Vane. Return to your lodgings and speak of this to no one. We will find your brother, but you must trust us to act alone. The veil is dangerous, and you may be watched." Clara nodded, replacing her veil. "Please, Mr. Holmes, save him. He's all I have." As she left, Watson turned to Holmes, his brow furrowed. "Do you believe her? She could be part of the veil, leading us into a trap." Holmes's lips twitched. "Her grief is genuine, Watson, but her story is incomplete. She knows more than she admits, perhaps, to protect Alistair, perhaps herself. The locket confirms Emily Harwood's importance. We must visit the Harwood family at once to trace her last movements." They hailed a cab to Kensington, where the Harwood estate stood, a stately mansion surrounded by manicured gardens. The butler, a dear man with a silver tray, admitted them after Holmes presented his card, claiming an urgent matter concerning Emily. They were led to a drawing room adorned with portraits and heavy drapes, where Lady Harwood, a frail woman in her 50s, received them, her face etched with sorrow. "Mr. Holmes," she said, her voice brittle, "I've heard of your reputation. Is this about my Emily? Have you found her?" Holmes chose his words carefully. "We are investigating a case that may involve your daughter, Lady Harwood. We need to know about her disappearance, every detail, no matter how small." Lady Harwood dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. "Emily vanished a year ago, after a gala at the Savoy. She was 20, bright, engaged to a young Manalista Vane. The magician. We disapproved, but she loved him. Then she was gonna no trace. The police found nothing." Watson leaned forward, sympathetic. "Did Vane visit after her disappearance, or mention any groups like the Saffron Veil?" Lady Harwood frowned. "Vane came once, distraught, claiming he'd failed her. He spoke of guilt, of a trick gone wrong, but wouldn't explain. As for this veil, I know nothing. But Emily's maid found a letter in her room, hidden. It mentioned a meeting at the docks, signed with a serpent symbol." Holmes's interest sharpened. "Do you still have the letter?" Lady Harwood nodded, summoning the butler. Moments later, he returned with a creased paper, its ink faded but legible. Holmes read it aloud. "Meet me at warehouse 17, midnight. The veil demands your silence. S." The serpent crest matched Crowley's ring and the warehouse box. "This is critical," Holmes said, pocketing the letter. Lady Harwood, Did Emily ever speak of a secret society or unusual friends? She was secretive toward the end, Lady Harwood admitted. She'd sneak out, return with strange trinket saffron ribbons, a pendant with a serpent. I thought it was youthful rebellion, but now Holmes stood, his mind racing. Thank you, Lady Harwood. We will do all we can to uncover the truth about Emily. As they left, Watson clutched the letter's implications. Emily was involved with the veil, wasn't she? And Vane's guilt could he have caused her disappearance? Holmes nodded, hailing a cab. Vane's journal and Clara's locket suggest he loved Emily but betrayed her, perhaps unwittingly. The veil used her to control him, and now they use her memory against him. Tonight's final performance may be his reckoning or ours. Back at 2-1B, Holmes spread the evidence on the table. The ledger, the ritual book, the locket, and the new letter. He began cross-referencing dates, noting overlaps between Vane's journal and the ledger's transactions. Emily disappeared. During a performance, he said. Vane's notes mention a failed tricker, Vanishing, that went wrong. If she was part of his act, the veil may have staged her abduction to bind him. Watson paced, restless. And Clara, she's hiding something about Emily. Indeed, Holmes said, lighting his pipe. Her mourning is real, but her silence is calculated. She may fear exposing Alistair's plan. We must watch her, but tonight we return to the docks. The veil's ritual mentions securing the warehouse, and Vane's performance is tonight. We infiltrate, observe, and, if necessary, act. As night fell, they prepared, arming themselves with revolvers and dark clothing. The docks were a maze of shadows, Warehouse 17's iron door glinting under a sliver of moon. Holmes picked the lock, and they slipped inside, the air heavy with the familiar scent of chemicals and dust. The table was cleared, but fresh footprints crisscrossed the floor, and a saffron ribbon hung from a crate. Holmes motioned for silence, creeping toward the rear. A faint glow emanated from behind a stack of barrels, where a trapdoor led to a lower level. Voices echoed low, urgent, speaking of the traitor and the girl's truth. Holmes and Watson descended, finding a hidden chamber lit by candles, its walls draped in saffron fabric. A dozen robed figures stood in a circle, the Hierophant at the center, holding a dagger. Vane's defiance ends tonight, he declared. The final vanishing will seal our power. Holmes whispered to Watson, We've found them. But where is Vane? Before they could act, a shout rang out. A robed figure had spotted them. Chaos erupted, the Veil's members drawing knives. Holmes fired a warning shot, scattering them, but the Hierophant vanished into a hidden passage. Watson tackled the fleeing figure, ripping off the hood to reveal a stagehand from the Lyceum. Talk, Watson demanded, pinning him. Where's Vane? The man gasped. He's alive, hiding. The Veil wants him dead. Check the chapel. Holmes pulled Watson back as more figures fled. We've exposed them, he said, but Vane's still out there. The chapel, the docks, Emily's ghost, they converge. We move now. They retreated, the knights swallowing their pursuit. The saffron veil was wounded, but its secrets remained, and Alistair Vane's final act was yet to play out. Holmes's mind burned with resolve, the lady in mourning's locket a weight in his pocket, urging him toward the truth. Chapter 7. The Heiress's Trail. The night was a cloak of shadows, as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson emerged from the chaotic confrontation at Warehouse 17, their breath misting in the chill air of the East India docks. The saffron veils. Ritual had been disrupted. their members scattered. But the Hierophant's escape and the stagehand's cryptic revelation that Alistair Vane was alive and hiding had ignited a new urgency in Holmes's pursuit. The locket from Clara Vane, bearing Emily Harwood's photograph, weighed heavily in his pocket, its connection to the missing heiress now undeniable. The trail of Emily's disappearance, intertwined with Vane's vanishing and the veil's machinations, led them to a new destination, the Harwood estate in Kensington, where secrets of the past might illuminate the present. Holmes hailed a hansom cab, his sharp features taut with focus. "To Kensington, Watson," he said, climbing in. "Lady Harwood's mention of Emily's letter and serpent pendant suggests the veil's influence reached her daughter long before Vane's disappearance. We must uncover what Emily knew and what Vane did to her." Watson, clutching his revolver, settled beside him, the adrenaline of the warehouse skirmish still coursing through him. "The stagehand said Vane's at the chapel," he said. "Shouldn't we go there first?" Holmes shook his head, his eyes glinting in the cab's dim interior. "The chapel is a lead, but the veil will expect us there now. Emily Harwood is the key. Her disappearance a year ago is the root of Vane's guilt and the veil's leverage. The Harwood estate holds answers, and we need them before we face the veil again." The cab rattled through London's fog-choked streets, the gaslights blurred into smears of gold. Watson's mind turned to Clara Vane's tearful plea and the locket's photograph, identical to the torn image from the warehouse. "Clara claimed ignorance of the girl in the locket," he said. "But she must know Emily's connection to Alistair. Why lie?" "Fear, Watson," Holmes replied, his fingers steepled. "Clara protects her brother, or herself. She may suspect Emily's fate, but dreads confirming it. The locket was a calculated gift. Vane gave it to her as insurance, a clue to his motives. We'll press her later, but first, the Harwoods, Kensington's." Quiet elegance enveloped them as the cab stopped before the Harwood estate, its iron gates gleaming under a sliver of moon. The mansion's windows glowed faintly, a sign of life within despite the late hour. Holmes paid the driver, instructing him to wait, then led Watson to the door, where a sharp rap summoned the butler, his silver tray gleaming in the lamplight. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," the butler said, recognizing them from their earlier visit. "Lady Harwood is abed, but I can fetch her." "The hour is late. It's urgent," Holmes interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "We have new information about Miss Emily. Wake Lady Harwood at once." The butler hesitated, then ushered them into the drawing-room, its heavy drapes and sombre portraits unchanged from their previous call. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows over a glass-fronted cabinet filled with porcelain and silver. Watson paced, restless, while Holmes examined a photograph on the mantel. Emily Harwood, radiant in a ball gown, her eyes bright with youth and promise. "Hard to believe she's gone," Watson murmured. "A year and no trace. Vane's guilt must be crushing." Holmes's gaze was distant, his mind dissecting the room's details. "Guilt drives men to desperate acts, Watson. Vane's final performance is his attempt to atone or to escape. The veil's ritual spoke of a traitor. If Emily was their victim, Vane's betrayal of them may be our path to the truth." Lady Harwood entered, her frail figure wrapped in a shawl, her face pale but composed. "Mr. Holmes," she said, seating herself, "you've news of Emily. Please, speak plainly." Holmes produced the locket, opening it to reveal Emily's photograph. "This was given to us by Clara Vane, Alistair's sister. It confirms Emily's connection to Vane and a group called the Saffron Veil. We believe her disappearance was no accident, but part of a larger scheme. Tell us everything about her final days, her habits, her secrets, any visitors." Lady Harwood's hand trembled as she took the locket, her eyes welling. Emily was changed in those last weeks. Secretive, distracted. She'd slip out at night, returning with odd trinket saffron ribbons, that serpent pendant. She spoke of a grand adventure, something that would change the world. I thought it was Vane's influence, his theatrical nonsense. "Did she mention the Saffron Veil?" Holmes asked, leaning forward. "Not by name," Lady Harwood replied, "but she spoke of a brotherhood that shared her dreams. She met Vane at a gala, and they were inseparable. He proposed within months, against our wishes. Then, after a performance at the Lyceum, she vanished. The police found her shawl by the Thames, but nothing else." Watson frowned, recalling the warehouse props. A performance. Could she have been part of Vane's act? Lady Harwood nodded, her voice breaking. She loved the stage. Vane trained her for a trick of vanishing, he called it. She was to disappear in a cabinet and reappear to applause. The night she vanished, she was to perform with him, he claimed. She never arrived, but I never believed him. Holmes's eyes narrowed. "The vanishing cabinet, describe it." "Mahogany, tall, with silver runes," Lady Harwood said. Emily was thrilled by it. She said it was a marvel, a gateway to another world. After she disappeared, Vane dismantled it, claiming it was cursed. Holmes exchanged a glance with Watson, the parallel to Vane's current cabinet, unmistakable. "One more thing," he said, producing the letter from Emily's room. "This mentions a meeting at Warehouse 17, signed with a serpent crest. Did Emily ever speak of the docks?" Lady Harwood's face tightened. "She mentioned the docks once, said Vane took her there to see a ship, a steamer, she thought. She was excited, but nervous. That was a week before she vanished." Holmes stood, pocketing the letter. "Thank you, Lady Harwood. We are closer to the truth. Rest assured, we will pursue every lead." As they left, Watson's mind raced. Emily was part of Vane's act, and the veil used her. But why, and how does it connect to his disappearance now? Holmes hailed their waiting cab, his expression grim. Emily was bait, Watson. The veil lured Vane into their web, using her love for him. Her disappearance, likely a stage trick gone wrong, bound him to their will through guilt. The ledgers, payments suggest he worked for them, perhaps smuggling or worse, to protect her memory. His final performance is his rebellion. The cab rolled toward Baker Street, but Holmes redirected the driver to Spitalfields, the stagehand mentioned. "The chapel," he said. "We've delayed too long. Emily's trail leads there, through Vane." At 2-1B, they gathered their gear, revolvers, torches, and the ledger for reference. Holmes studied the ritual book's torn page, noting a diagram of a trapdoor mechanism labeled the Veil's Gate. The chapel's deconsecrated state makes it ideal for the Veil's rituals, he said. "If Vane's hiding there, we'll find him." Spitalfields was a warren of narrow streets, the chapel's silhouette stark against the night sky. The saffron ribbon still fluttered on the gate, a silent invitation. Holmes picked the lock on a side door, and they slipped inside, the air heavy with wax and decay. Candle stubs littered the floor, remnants of the previous night's ritual. But the chapel was empty, or so it seemed. Holmes's torch swept the nave, pausing at a faint scratch on the stone floor. "A trap door," he whispered, kneeling to trace its outline. With Watson's help, he lifted it, revealing a stone staircase descending into darkness. The air below was damp, laced with the chemical tang of stage props. They descended, finding a subterranean chamber lined with crates and draped in saffron fabric. A table held a half-finished Prapor mirror frame, its glass missing, and a notebook in Vane's hand, its pages filled with frantic scrawls. The veil knows. Emily's gone because of me. The final trick must work. Watson read over Holmes's shoulder, his heart sinking. He blames himself. But is she dead or hidden? Holmes pocketed the notebook, his torch catching a glint of metal, a serpent-embossed dagger, identical to the Hierophant's. Before he could examine it, a low creak echoed from above. Footsteps, deliberate and heavy, approached the trapdoor. Holmes doused the torch, pulling Watson behind a crate. 3 figures descended, their saffron robes rustling. One spoke, his voice sharp. Vane's here. The Hierophant wants him alive for. Now, search every corner. Watson's grip tightened on his revolver, but Holmes whispered, "Wait. We learn more by listening." The figures spread out, their lanterns casting eerie shadows. One paused by the table, cursing. His notes are gone. Holmes was here. Another laughed, a cold sound. Holmes is a bloodhound, but he's no match for the veil. The girls. Truth will bury them both. Holmes's eyes gleamed, piecing together the fragments. The girl's truth was Emily, her fate, her connection to Vane, the veil's ultimate leverage. As the figures searched, Holmes motioned to Watson, pointing to a narrow passage at the chamber's rear. They crept toward it, avoiding detection, and emerged into an alley, the chapel's walls looming behind them. "We were close," Watson said, frustrated. "Vane's there, somewhere." Holmes nodded, his mind racing. "He's hiding, but the veil's closing in. Emily's trail has led us to him, but we need her full story." The letter mentioned a steamer, likely a veil operation. "We return to the docks tomorrow, and we confront Clara. She knows more about Emily than she's told." The night swallowed their retreat, the chapel's secrets locked within its stones. The heiress's trail had brought them closer to Alistair Vane, but the saffron veil's shadow grew darker, and Sherlock Holmes knew the final act was near. Chapter 8. A game of mirrors. The fog clung to London. Like a conspirator's cloak, as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John. Watson stepped from their hansom cab onto the gaslit pavement of the West End. The Lyceum Theatre loomed before them, its ornate facade, a silent witness to Alistair Vane's vanishing act, now 2 nights past. The revelations from the Spitalfields Chapel, Vane's notebook, the saffron veil's pursuit, and the lingering spectre of Emily Harwood's disappearance had sharpened Holmes's focus. The trail of the missing heiress had led them back to the stage where it all began, where the vanishing cabinet held secrets yet to be unlocked. Holmes's mind, a blade honed by logic, was fixed on the mechanics of Vane's trick, suspecting that the answer to his whereabouts lay not in the docks or the chapel, but in the illusion itself. "Holmes," Watson said, adjusting his scarf. "Against the chill, we know Vane's hiding, likely at the chapel, and the veil's hunting him. Why return to the theatre? Shouldn't we be scouring Spitalfields?" Holmes's eyes glinted under the brim of his hat. "The chapel is a trap, Watson, baited by the veil to lure us." Vane's notebook spoke of a final trick, and his journal obsessed over mirror alignments. The vanishing cabinet is the key. Its mechanism hides how he escaped, and perhaps why. We must dissect the illusion to find the man. They approached the theatre's side entrance, where a sleepy watchman, bribed with a sovereign, let them in with a grumble. The auditorium was dark, the air heavy with the scent of dust and grease paint. The stage, still cordoned off by Inspector Lestrade's orders, was untouched, the vanishing cabinet standing at its center like a monolith. Its mahogany surface gleamed faintly, the silver runes catching the dim light of Holmes's electric torch. Holmes circled the cabinet, his fingers brushing the wood, testing seams and panels. Vane was a master of misdirection, he said, tapping the door. The audience saw him enter, the door lock, the cabinet spin, yet he was gone. The latch is internal, engaged, yet the interior is empty. How Watson peered inside the black velvet lining absorbing the torch's beam. A trapdoor in the cabinet's floor, or a false back. Holmes shook his head, kneeling to examine the stage beneath. The cabinet was elevated, and the stage floor shows no trapdoor nearby, save the one we found too far to reach undetected. But Vane's journal mentioned mirrors. Illusions often rely on reflection to deceive the eye. He stepped back, studying the cabinet's design. Watson, fetch the stage manager's log from the wings. It should list the props used at night. I need to know the lighting and backdrop. Watson hurried to the stage manager's booth, returning with a leather-bound logbook. He flipped through it, reading aloud. Crimson curtains, gas lights at half, 2 spotlights on the cabinet. Star-painted backdrop. Nothing unusual. Holmes's eyes narrowed. Star-painted backdrop. Reflective, perhaps, catching the spotlights. Help me move the cabinet. They pushed the heavy structure aside, revealing the stage floor's faint scratch mark from their first inspection. Holmes knelt, tracing it, then stood and examined the backdrop, a heavy canvas draped across the rear of the stage. He tugged it, revealing a frame of polished wood and a large angled mirror hidden behind it, its surface flawless, aligned to reflect the cabinet's front. A mirror, Watson said, astonished. It reflected the cabinet, making it seem empty. Precisely, Holmes replied, his voice quickening. The audience saw a reflection of an empty cabinet, not the real one. Vane never left the cabinet during the spin. He was hidden inside, behind a false panel or in a compartment. The mirror created the illusion of his absence. He returned to the cabinet, tapping its interior walls with renewed vigor. A faint hollow sound came from the back panel. Holmes pressed along its edges, and with a soft click, the panel slid aside, revealing a narrow compartment just large enough for a man to crouch in. Here, he said, shining his torch inside. Vane hid here, locked the latch, and waited for the stagehands to wheel the cabinet off stage. Watson peered into the compartment, noting a smudge of grease paint and a single saffron thread caught in the wood. But how did he escape after? The cabinet was searched. Holmes closed the panel, stepping back. The search was cursory, Watson. In the chaos, Vane slipped out backstage, likely through the trapdoor we found. But the question is not just how, but why. The mirror trick required an accomplice to align the backdrop and light someone in the theatre that night. Mind raced, recalling the stagehand's mention of a cloaked figure. The figure Lestrade reported, or Crowley in the audience. Crowley's presence is no coincidence, Holmes said, pocketing the saffron thread. But the cloaked figure suggests another player perhaps, a Vale member or Vane's ally. We need the stagehand's accounts again, and we must examine the lighting rig. They climbed to the catwalk above the stage, a maze of ropes and pulleys. Bathed in shadows, Holmes inspected the spotlights noting their angles. These were adjusted, he said, pointing to fresh scratches on the mounts. Someone redirected them to hit the mirror at the precise angle. A skilled hand, likely a stage hand familiar with Vane's act. Watson scanned the logbook, finding the crew list. There's a name, Hitam Riley, lighting chief. He was on duty that night, and another, James Cobb, a new hire, backstage during the finale. Holmes nodded, committing the names to memory. Riley and Cobb. We'll question them, but first, the trapdoor. If Vane used it to escape, it may hold more clues. They descended to the stage and opened the trapdoor near the coiled rope, its hinges creaking softly. The crawl space below was as they'd left it, dusty, cluttered with pulleys, and marked by footprints. Holmes's torch swept the floor, pausing at a fresh scuff near a crate. He pushed it aside, revealing a small, locked box. Its surface scratched, as if dragged to the source of the stage's mark. Holmes produced the crescent key from Vane's dressing room, inserting it into the lock. The box opened, revealing a bundle of letters, each sealed with a serpent crest. He broke one open, reading aloud, "A.V., your debt is due. The Vale's patience wanes. Deliver the girl's secret, or the docks will be your grave." H. Watson's eyes widened. The Hierophant. They wanted Emily's secret, her involvement with the Vale. Holmes tucked the letters into his coat. Emily was more than a victim, Watson. She knew something, perhaps, about the Vale's operations or Vane's role in them. These letters confirm Vane was under pressure, likely why he staged his vanishing. But the mirror trick required planning. He had help. They emerged from the crawl space, the theatre's silence pressing round them. Holmes paced the stage, his mind reconstructing the trick. Picture it, Watson. Vane enters the cabinet, locks it, slips into the compartment. The mirror reflects an empty interior. The stagehands wheeled the cabinet off, and in the confusion, Vane escapes via the trapdoor. But someone ensured the mirror was in place, the lights aligned. That someone is our next lead. Watson flipped through the logbook, pausing at a note. Riley's address is in Shoreditch. Cobb's not listed, but the stage manager mentioned he's new, keeps to himself. Could Cobb be the cloaked figure? Possibly, Holmes said, his eyes distant. Or a Vale plant, watching Vane. We'll find Riley first. But before we leave, the dressing room. Vane's journal may hold more about the mirror. They returned to Vane's cramped dressing room, its walls still plastered with posters of his triumphs. Holmes rifled through the journal, finding a sketch of the cabinet with annotations. Mirror at 45 degrees, spotlight 30. Cobb to signal. He showed it to Watson, his expression grim. Cobb was Vane's accomplice. His role was critical. Watson's jaw tightened. If Cobb's with the Vale, he betrayed Vane, or Vane used him, Holmes countered. The game of mirrors is deception layered on deception. We need Cobb's whereabouts and Riley's account of the lights. They left the theatre. The fog thicker now, swallowing the street's edges. A cab took them to Shoreditch, where Tom Riley lived in a narrow tenement above a butcher's shop. The air reeked of blood and sawdust as they climbed the creaking stairs and knocked. Riley, a wiry man with a smoker's cough, opened the door, his eyes wary. "Mr. Holmes," he said, recognizing them from the theatre. "What's this about?" "The night Vane vanished," Holmes said, stepping inside. "You adjusted the spotlights. Who gave the order?" Riley fidgeted, wiping his hands on his apron. "No one, sir. I set M, as always, 2 on the cabinet, per Vane's notes. But Cobb was up there, fiddling with the rig. Said Vane wanted a tweak. I didn't think nothing of it. Holmes leaned closer, his voice low. Describe Cobb. Young, quiet, dark hair, Riley said. Kept his cap low, didn't talk much, started a month ago. After the show, he scarpered, haven't seen him since. Holmes exchanged a glance with Watson. Did Cobb mention the saffron veil, or a woman named Emily Harwood? Riley shook his head, coughing. No, sir, but he was nervy, always looking over his shoulder. Once I heard him muttering about a veil and debts, thought he was drunk. Holmes pressed a coin into Riley's hand. If Cobb returns, send word to Baker Street. Say nothing to anyone else. Back in the cab, Watson's frustration boiled over. Cobb's our man, Holmes. He's with the veil or Vane's puppet. Where do we find him? Holmes lit his pipe, the smoke curling like his thoughts. Cobb's a ghost, Watson. Likely hiding with Vane or the veil. The letters mention the docks as Vane's grave. We return there tonight. But first, we confront Clara Vane. Her locket and silence tie her to Emily. She knows where Cobb fits. They redirected the cab to Clara's lodgings in Bloomsbury, a modest boarding house with ivy-clad walls. Clara, still in mourning black, received them in a small parlour, her face pale but composed. Mr. Holmes, she said, have you found Alistair? Holmes produced the locket, opening it to Emily's photograph. Miss Vane, you claimed ignorance of this woman. Yet Emily Harwood was your brother's fiancée, vanished during his act. You know her, why lie? Clara's hands trembled, but her voice held firm. I suspected it was Emily, but Alistair swore me to secrecy. He said the veil would kill us both if I spoke. Emily was his love, but she was taken by them. He blamed himself, said his trick failed her. Holmes's eyes bored into hers. And James Cobb. He helped Alistair vanish. Where is he? Clara's gaze faltered. Cobb was a stagehand, loyal to Alistair. He came to me after the show, terrified, saying the veil was after him. I hid him, but he left yesterday, muttering about the chapel. I swear I don't know where he is now. Holmes stood, his mind racing. Miss Vane, your brother's life depends on your truth. If Cobb contacts you, send for us immediately. As they left, Watson's jaw clenched. She's still hiding something. Holmes, Cobb's with Vane, and the veil's closing in. Holmes nodded, hailing a cab to the docks. The game of mirrors is Vane's design, Watson, but the veil plays it too. Cobb is the pivotal eye or traitor. Tonight, we hunt them all. The docks were a maze of shadows. Warehouse 17's iron door, a silent challenge. Holmes picked the lock, and they slipped inside, the air thick with the chemical tang of the veil's props. The chamber below was empty, but fresh footprints led to a hidden passage, its walls marked with saffron ribbons. Holmes's torch caught a glinter serpent dagger, dropped in haste. They were here, he whispered, pocketing the dagger. Vane, Cobb, or the veil. The final trick is near. The passage stretched into darkness, a labyrinth beneath the docks. Holmes and Watson pressed on, the mirrors of Vane's deception reflecting their every step, leading them deeper into the heart of the saffron veil's game. Chapter 9. The traitors masked the labyrinthine passage beneath Warehouse 17, stretched into the darkness. Its damp stone walls slick with condensation and faintly marked by saffron ribbons that fluttered like ghostly signals. Sherlock Holmes. and Dr. John Watson moved cautiously, their footsteps muffled by the thick air heavy with the chemical tang of stage props and the musty scent of decay. Holmes's electric torch cast a thin beam, revealing rough-hewn tunnels that branched unpredictably, a hidden network beneath the East India docks. The serpent-embossed dagger Holmes had found dropped in Harstley, heavy in his coat pocket, its presence a grim reminder of the Saffron Vale's proximity. The revelations from the Lyceum Theatre, Clara Vane's guarded truths, and the stagehand James Cobb's role in Alistair Vane's Vanishing had converged here in this underworld, where the magician's final trick was unfolding. Holmes paused at a fork in the tunnel, his sharp eyes scanning the floor. "Footprints," he whispered, kneeling to examine a smudge of mud and grease paint. "Recent, hurried. 2 sets, one heavy, likely male, the other lighter. Vane and Cobb, perhaps, or Vale pursuers. The ribbons mark their path. Watson, his revolver at the ready, peered into the gloom. If Cobb helped Vane escape, why run, and why here, under the docks? Holmes stood, his torch sweeping the left tunnel, where a saffron ribbon hung from a rusted nail. Cobb is either Vane's ally or his betrayer, Watson. The mirror trick required trust, but the Vale's ritual spoke of a traitor. This passage is their bolt-hole law, a trap. We proceed with care." They followed the ribboned path, the tunnel narrowing until the walls brushed their shoulders. The air grew colder, the chemical scent stronger, suggesting proximity to the Vale's operations. Holmes's mind raced, piecing together the fragments. Vane's guilt over Emily Harwood's disappearance, the ledger's coded payments, Lockett and the stagehand's claim that Vane was hiding in the Spitalfields chapel. The docks, the theatre, the chapel law were stages for Vane's desperate performance, and Cobb was the linchpin. A faint scuffle echoed ahead, and Holmes doused the torch, plunging them into darkness. Watson's breath caught, his grip tightening. On his revolver, "Someone's there," he whispered. Holmes motioned for silence, creeping forward until a sliver of candlelight spilled from a side chamber. They pressed against the wall, peering inside. The chamber was small, its walls draped in saffron fabric. A crude altar at its center, strewn with mirrors, vials, and a tattered script labeled "The Final Vanishing." 2 figures stood within. One, a gaunt man in a tattered stagecoat, was Alistair Vane, his face haggard, his eyes darting with fear. The other, younger, with a low cap obscuring his features, was James Cobb, clutching a knife and speaking in a low, urgent tone. "You can't hide forever, Alistair," Cobb said, his voice tense. "The Vale knows you're here. Give me the ledger's key, and I'll get you out." Vane's hand shook as he backed against the altar. "You betrayed me, Cobb. You told them about the chapel. The mirror trick was your idea, and now they're hunting me." Cobb stepped closer, the knife glinting. "I had no choice. The Vale's got my sister, same as they had Emily. Hand over the key, or we're both dead," Holmes whispered to Watson. "The ledger's key a cipher, perhaps, to decode its secrets. Cobb's under duress, but his loyalty is unclear. We intervene, but quietly." They slipped into the chamber, Holmes's revolver drawn, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Drop the knife, Mr. Cobb. Step away from Vane." Cobb spun, his cap falling to reveal a pale, sweat-slicked face, his eyes wide. With panic, Vane gasped, stumbling back, knocking over a vial that shattered, releasing a sharp chemical odor. "Holmes," Vane cried, "thank God you've got to stop them." Cobb hesitated, then dropped the knife, raising his hands. "I ain't your enemy, Mr. Holmes. The veils got us all cornered. I helped Alistair vanish, but they're after us both. Holmes kept his revolver trained on Cobb, his eyes flicking to Vane. Explain, Mr. Vane, why stage your disappearance? And what is this final vanishing the veil fears? Vane sank onto a crate, his voice hoarse. It was my only way out. The saffron veil, they used me, my illusions, to smuggle goods, fake deaths, even abduct people. Emily Harwood. She was my fiancée, part of my act. A year ago, during a vanishing trick, the veil took her, staged it to look like my fault. They've held her over me ever since, forcing me to work for them. Watson's jaw tightened, recalling. The locket. Is Emily alive? Vane's eyes welled. I don't know. They claim she's hidden, a prisoner, but I've seen no proof. The ledger, it's their record of crimes, payments, victims. I stole it, planned to expose them. The mirror trick was my escape, with Cobb's help, but they're everywhere. Holmes turned to Cobb, his gaze piercing. And you, Mr. Cobb, you adjusted the lights, signaled the mirror. Yet you threaten Vane now. Whose side are you on? Cobb's shoulders slumped. The veils got my sister, Mary, locked away like Emily. They forced me to watch Alistair report his moves. I helped him vanish to save him, hoping to free Mary, but they found us here. The key Taze, a cipher, hidden in Alistair's props. Without it, the ledger's useless. Holmes lowered his revolver slightly, assessing Cobb's sincerity. Where is this key? Vane hesitated, then reached into his coat, producing a small brass disc engraved with cryptic symbols. It's here. A code wheel matches the ledgers. Symbols. I hid it in the chapel, but Cobb brought me here when the veil raided it. Before Holmes could take the disc, a low whistle echoed from the tunnel, followed by the thud of boots. They're here, Cobb hissed, grabbing his knife. Holmes spun, shoving Vane and Cobb behind the altar. Watson covered the entrance. We hold them off. Saffron-robed figures poured into the chamber, their faces masked, knives gleaming. In the candlelight, Holmes fired a warning shot, the crack echoing off the stone. But the veil pressed forward, their leader a tall figure in a black robe. The Hierophant barking orders. Take Vane alive. Kill the others. Watson fired, dropping one attacker, while Holmes hurled a vial from the altar, its contents exploding in a cloud of choking smoke. The veil faltered, coughing, but the Hierophant lunged. His dagger aimed at Vane. Cobb tackled him, the two grappling as Holmes pulled Vane toward the passage. Run, Holmes shouted, dragging Vane while Watson covered their retreat, firing. To keep the veil at bay. They stumbled through the tunnels, the saffron ribbons their only guide, until they reached a rusted ladder leading to the surface. Holmes pushed Vane up, Watson following, as shouts and footsteps echoed behind. They emerged into an alley, the dock's fog swallowing their trail. Vane clutched the code wheel, panting. The chapel, he gasped. I have to finish at the final trick. It's the only way to stop them. Holmes grabbed his arm, his voice steely. No more running, Vane. You're with us now. The veil wants that ledger decoded, which means we use it against them. Cobb, where is he? Vane shook his head. He stayed behind, fighting. He's trying to save Mary. Watson's face darkened. We can't leave him. Holmes's expression was grim. Cobb made his choice, Watson. Our priority is Vane and the ledger. We return to Baker Street, decode the cipher, and plan our next move. The veil's wounded, but they'll strike again. They hailed a cab. Vane slumped between them, the code wheel glinting in his trembling hand. At 2-1B, the fire roared, and Holmes spread the ledger on the table, aligning the code wheel symbols. Lines of cryptic numbers transformed into names, dates, and crimes. Smuggling routes, staged abductions, payoffs to theatre owners. Emily Harwood's name appeared, linked to a failed operation at the docks, her status marked unknown. Watson read over Holmes's shoulder, his heart heavy. They used her in a trick, then took her. Vane's been their puppet ever since. Holmes nodded, his pipe sending curls of smoke toward the ceiling. The Hierophant controls the veil. But Cobb's betrayal suggests cracks in their unity. The final vanishing is Vane's plan to expose them, likely at the chapel. We must draw them out, but first we confront Clara Vane again. She hid Cobb. She may know more about Emily's fate. They set out for Bloomsbury, Clara's boarding house, quiet under the pre-dawn sky. Clara, pale and sleepless, met them in the parlour, her eyes widening at Vane's haggard form. "Alistair," she cried, rushing to him. "You're alive." Holmes stepped between them, his voice cold. "Miss Vane, you sheltered James Cobb. You knew he was Vane's accomplice. What else are you hiding about Emily Harwood?" Clara's hands twisted her handkerchief, her voice breaking. I knew Emily was Alistair's fiancée. He told me the Veil took her, used her to control him. Cobb came to me, begging for help, said the Veil had his sister. I hid him, but he left for the docks. I swear, I only wanted to save Alistair. Holmes's eyes bored into hers, and the locket. You recognized Emily, but lied. Why? Clara sank into a chair, tears streaming. Alistair gave me the locket, to keep her memory alive. He said if he failed, I was to find you, Mr. Holmes. I was afraid the Veil would come for me. Vane gripped her hand, his voice hoarse. Clara's innocent, Holmes. She's risked everything for me. Holmes relented, his tone softening. Very well, but the Veil is closing in. Vane, your final trick, what is it? Vane's eyes burned with resolve. A performance at the chapel tonight. I've rigged a trap, mirrors, chemicals, a fake ritual to lure the Veil. I'll expose their crimes, broadcast the ledger's secrets to the police. But I need your help to pull it off. Holmes nodded, his mind already mapping the plan. We'll use your trick, Vane, but on our terms. Watson, we prepare for battlefields. The traitor's mask is slipping, and the saffron veil will face the light. The dawn broke, grey and heavy, as they returned to Baker Street, the coat, and ledger their weapons. The docks had revealed Vane's desperation, Cobb's divided loyalty, and the Veil's relentless pursuit. The final act loomed, and Sherlock Holmes was ready to unmask the traitor at its heart. Chapter 10. The Saffron Conspiracy. The first light of dawn crept through the curtains of 2-1B Baker Street, painting the cluttered sitting room in shades of grey. Sherlock Holmes sat at the table, his pipe sending tendrils of smoke toward the ceiling. The decoded ledger spread before him like a map of treachery. The code wheel, its cryptic symbols aligned, had unlocked the Saffron Veil's secrets, names, dates, and crimes that wove a tapestry of deceit stretching from London's theatres to its docks. Alistair Vane, slumped in an armchair, looked like a man haunted, his gaunt face etched with the weight of his past. Dr. John Watson, pacing by the fire, clutched the serpent-embossed dagger from the docks, his mind on the confrontation with the Veil and the stagehand, James Cobb's desperate stand. The revelation of Vane's plan, a final performance to expose the veil at the Spitalfields chapel, hung in the air. A gambit as daring as it was dangerous. Holmes set down his pipe, his sharp eyes fixed on Vane. Your plan, Mr. Vane, is audacious but incomplete. A fake ritual to lure the veil, mirrors and chemicals to trap them, and the ledger's secrets to damn them. But the Hierophant is no fool, and the veil's reach is long. We must refine your trick, ensure it's foolproof. Tell me every detail. Vane leaned forward, his voice hoarse but resolute. The chapel's rigged a network of mirrors, like the one in the Lyceum's cabinet trick, to create the illusion of a ritual. I've hidden flash powders and smoke vials to disorient them. The ledger's key pages names of their leaders, their smuggling routes are copied, ready to be slipped to the police. I'll pose as the Hierophant, draw them in, then signal you to spring the trap. Watson stopped, pacing, his brow furrowed, and if they see through it, the Hierophant escaped the warehouse. He'll be wary. Vane's hands trembled, but his eyes burned with defiance. They want me dead, Dr. Watson, but they need the ledger's cipher. I'm the bait. The chapel's deconsecrated, forgotten, no one will interfere. But I can't do it alone. The veil's numbers are too great. Holmes nodded, his mind already dissecting the plan. We'll need Inspector Lestrade's men, discreetly positioned. The chapel's layout, describe it. Vane sketched a rough map on a scrap of paper. A rectangular nave, a raised altar, a crypt below accessed by a trapdoor, and a rear vestry with a hidden exit. The mirrors are in the crypt, he said, angled to reflect the altar. The smoke. Vials are under the pews, triggered by a wire. I've rehearsed it a dozen times. Holmes studied the sketch, his fingers tracing the exits. Good, but vulnerable. The veil will guard the exits, and the Hierophant may suspect a ruse. We'll need a diversion, something to split their forces. He turned to Watson, contact Lestrade. Request a dozen constables, armed, to surround the chapel by dusk. Tell him it's a matter of life and death, but no sirens, no uniforms. Watson nodded, grabbing his coat. And Clara, she's still in danger, hiding Cobb, knowing Emily's fate. Holmes's eyes narrowed. Clara will be watched, but she stays out of this. Her role is done until we secure Vane. Go, Watson, and return. Quickly, we have preparations to make. As Watson left, Holmes turned to Vane, producing the locket with Emily Harwood's photograph. One question remains, Mr. Vane. Emily, your fiancée, your guilt. The ledger marks her as a failed operation. What happened that night? A year ago, Vane's face crumpled, his voice barely a whisper. She was my partner, on stage and off. The veil wanted her father's influence lord, Harwood's shipping contracts. They forced me to stage a vanishing trick, said they'd use it to borrow her, pressure her father. I thought it was a bluff. I rigged the cabinet, mirrors, a trapdoor. She entered, vanished, but they took her, Holmes. Not a kidnapping. I've been their pawn ever since, trying to find her, to atone. Holmes's expression remained impassive, but his mind catalogued the betrayal, and the veil's claim she's alive. A lie, I fear, Vane said, tears welling. Or a half-truth. The ledger mentions a secure location, but no details. I planned the final trick to force their hand, expose them, make them reveal her fate. Holmes stood, pacing. Then we proceed. The chapel is our stage, the ledger our script. But the veil's conspiracy runs deeper than smuggling. The names, here politicians, theatre owners, even a Scotland Yard clerk suggest influence, not just crime. We must cripple them tonight. By midday, Watson returned, Lestrade's agreement secured. The constables would be in place by dusk, disguised as dock workers to avoid suspicion. Holmes spent the afternoon refining Vane's plan, sketching mirror, angles and timing the smoke triggers. He sent a telegram to Silas Moore, the antiquarian, requesting any last-minute intelligence on the Vale's movements. Moore's reply was brief: Vale active near Spitalfields, whispers of a cleansing. Beware the Hierophant's wrath. As dusk fell, Holmes, Watson, and Vane set out for Spitalfields, their cab rattling through streets thick with fog. The chapel's silhouette loomed, its gate marked by the familiar saffron ribbon, now tattered by the wind. Holmes led them through the alley to the rear vestry, picking the lock with practiced ease. Inside, the air was heavy with wax and decay. The nave, a forest of shadows broken by the altar's faint glow. Vane pointed to the crypt's trapdoor, hidden beneath a pew. The mirrors are down there, aligned. The smoke vials are wired to the altar pole, the lever, and they'll ignite. I'll stand here, in the Hierophant's robe, and call the meeting. Holmes inspected the setup, noting the mirror's precision and the vial's placement. Good work, Vane, but we'll add a twist. Watson, you'll take the vestry, ready to signal Lestrade's men. I'll be in the crypt, watching the mirrors. If the Vale attacks, we use their own illusion against them. They descended to the crypt, a damp, stone-walled chamber lined with cracked tombs. The mirrors, large and angled, reflected the altar above, creating a ghostly double of the nave. Holmes tested the smoke triggers, satisfied with their range. The Vale will see what we want them to see, he said, his voice low. Vane, your performance begins at midnight. Don't falter. As night deepened, the chapel grew colder, the silence oppressive. Watson took his post in the vestry, revolver in hand, while Holmes crouched in the crypt, his torch doused. Vane donned a black robe, its hood shadowing his face, and stood by the altar, clutching the code wheel like a talisman. The clock struck 11, and the first signs of the Vale appeared: soft footsteps, the rustle of saffron robes, the flicker of lanterns in the nave. Holmes watched through a mirror, counting a dozen figures, their faces masked, knives at their belts. The Hierophant entered last, his black robe sweeping the floor, a serpent-embossed chalice in his hands. Brothers, he intoned, his voice resonant, the traitor is among us. Vane's defiance ends tonight. The cleansing begins. Vane stepped forward, his voice steady despite his fear. I am the Hierophant, he declared, raising the code wheel. The ledger's secrets are mine. Who dares challenge me? The Vale hesitated, murmurs rippling through their ranks. The true Hierophant laughed, a cold, theatrical sound. A bold mask, vain, but it slips. You're no leader, just a pawn. Who thought he could play king? Holmes signaled Watson through a pre-arranged knock, and Watson pulled the vestry lever, igniting the smoke vials. Thick, acrid clouds billowed from the pews, shrouding the nave in chaos. The Vale coughed, their knives flashing as they lunged for Vane, but Holmes sprang from the crypt, revolver drawn, firing warning shots that echoed off the stone. Police, Watson shouted, signaling Lestrade's men. The constables stormed in, truncheons swinging, as the Vale fought back, their knives slashing through the smoke. Vane ducked behind the altar, clutching the code wheel, while Holmes tackled a robed figure, ripping off the mask to reveal a theatre manager from the Lyceum. Traitor, the Hierophant roared, lunging for Vane, but Watson fired, grazing his arm. The Hierophant staggered, dropping the chalice, and fled toward the vestry, vanishing into the hidden exit. Holmes pursued, but the passage was blocked by a collapsing mirror, its glass shattering in a cascade of sparks. "Let him go," he called to Watson, dragging Vane to safety. "We have enough." The constables subdued the remaining Vale members, their saffron robes torn, their masks scattered. Lestrade, red-faced and triumphant, clapped Holmes on the shoulder. "You've done it, Holmes. A whole nest of vipers." Holmes's expression remained grim. "Not all, Lestrade. The Hierophant escaped, and the ledger's full scope is yet to be revealed. But we have Vane and the cipher." Vane, trembling but alive, handed Holmes the code wheel. "The copies," he said, pointing to a satchel hidden under the altar. "Names, crimes, give them to the papers, the police. End this." Holmes took the satchel, its weight, a promise of justice. "You've played your part, Vane. Now stay with Lestrade. The Vale's not finished." As the constables led the prisoners away, Watson joined Holmes, wiping sweat from his brow. "The Hierophant Crowley, you think?" Holmes shook his head, examining the fallen chalice, its serpent crest glinting. "Crowley's ring matches, but his alibi for the Lyceum holds. The Hierophant is someone else, someone with theatre. In their blood, orchestrating this conspiracy. We need Emily's fate to unmask him." They returned to Baker Street. The satchel's contents spread across the table. Lists of Vale members, including minor nobles and a dockyard official, and details of smuggling operations masked as theatrical shipments. Emily's name appeared, again linked to a secure location at the docks, dated a month ago. "She may be alive," Watson said, hope flickering. Vane's trick worked, but the Hierophant's still out there. Holmes lit his pipe, the smoke curling like his thoughts. "The saffron conspiracy is cracked, Watson, but not broken. Tomorrow we search the docks for Emily, confront Crowley, and hunt the Hierophant. The final vanishing is Vane's, but the final truth is ours." The fire crackled, the ledger's secrets a beacon in the dawn. The saffron veil's mask was slipping, and Sherlock Holmes was ready to tear it away. Chapter 11. The Return of the Magician. The morning sun struggled through the fog that clung to London, casting a muted glow over Baker Street as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson prepared for the next act in their pursuit of the saffron veil. The sitting room at 221B was a battlefield of evidence. The decoded ledger, its pages annotated with Holmes's precise script. The serpent-embossed chalice from the Spitalfields Chapel, and Alistair Vane's satchel of copied documents, ready to expose the Vale's crimes to the authorities. Vane himself, though safe under Inspector Lestrade's protection at Scotland Yard, remained a shadow of the charismatic magician, his spirit broken by guilt over Emily Harwood and the weight of his betrayal of the Vale. The Hierophant's escape during the chapel raid had left a bitter edge to their victory, and Holmes's mind burned with the need to unmask the Vale's leader and uncover Emily's fate. Holmes stood by the window, his pipe unlit, his sharp eyes scanning the street below for any sign of the Vale's spies. "The Hierophant is wounded, Watson," he said, his voice low and measured, "but a wounded predator is dangerous. Vane's performance exposed the Vale's rank and file, but their leader remains free. And Emily Harwood's secure location, noted in the ledger, suggests she may yet live. We must act swiftly before the Vale regroups." Watson, cleaning his revolver at the table, nodded grimly. Vane's back, but at what cost? Cobb's still missing, likely dead in the docks, and Clarushi's terrified, hiding at her boarding house. Do we bring her in? Holmes turned, his expression unreadable. Clara's role is secondary for now. Her knowledge of Emily and Cobb is valuable, but she's a liability in the field. Our focus is the Docks Warehouse 17, where the ledger mentions a secure location. If Emily is alive, she's there, and the Hierophant will know we're coming. We stage a trap, using Vane's return as bait. Watson frowned, holstering his revolver. A trap? You mean another performance? Precisely, Holmes said, crossing to the table and picking up Vane's satchel. The Vale believes Vane is in custody, but they don't know we have the ledger's full cipher. We'll orchestrate a public reappearancer, staged séance at the Lyceum. Announced as Vane's return from the ether, the Hierophant won't resist the chance to silence him, and we'll be ready. Watson's eyes widened. Risky, Holmes. The Vale's desperate. They'll come armed, and the theatre's a death trap if we're outnumbered. Holmes's lips twitched in a faint smile. Which is why we control the stage, Watson. The Lyceum's mirrors, trapdoors, and lighting are our allies. Vane's expertise will ensure the illusion is flawless, and less tradesmen will seal the exits. We draw the Hierophant into the open, secure Emily's location, and end this conspiracy. They set out for Scotland Yard, where Lestrade had Vane under guard in a sparse office littered with case files. Vane, pale but resolute, rose as they entered, his hands no longer trembling. "Mr. Holmes," he said, "I heard about the chapel. You saved my life. What now?" Holmes outlined the plan, his voice crisp. "A séance, Mr. Vane, at the Lyceum tonight. You'll appear as a spectral figure, conjured by a medium myself in disguise. The Vale will come, expecting to eliminate you. We'll use mirrors and smoke, as you did, to disorient them. Your role is to sell the illusion, then retreat to safety. Can you manage it?" Vane nodded, a spark of his old showmanship returning. "I've played bigger audiences, Holmes. The vanishing cabinet's still there, I can rig it for the effect. But the Hierophant, he's cunning. He'll suspect a trap. Which is why we misdirect," Holmes said, producing the chalice. "This, displayed as a relic of your vanishing, will draw their eyes. The ledger's copies will be planted in the theatre, bait for the Hierophant to seize. When he does, we close the net." Lestrade, leaning against the desk, scratched his head. "You're gambling with a lot of lives, Holmes. If this goes wrong, the theatre's a bloodbath." Holmes's gaze was steely. "Then ensure your men are sharp, Lestrade. 20 constables, plainclothes, stationed at every exit and in the audience. Watson will coordinate from the wings. We begin at dusk." The day passed in a flurry of preparation. Holmes and Vane returned to the Lyceum, where the stagehands, still rattled by the original Vanishing, were persuaded with a mix of bribes and Lestrade's authority to assist. Vane, reinvigorated by the chance to strike back, rigged the Vanishing cabinet with new mirrors, aligning them to project a ghostly image of himself across the stage. He hid smoke vials under the floorboards, wired to a lever in the wings, and adjusted the spotlights to create an ethereal glow. Holmes, meanwhile, donned a theatrical disguise, flowing robes, a grey wig, and grease paint to age his features, transforming into a medium named Madame Alara. Watson, overseeing the constable's placement, marvelled at the setup. "You look like a charlatan, Holmes," he said, grinning despite the tension. "How do you know the Vale will bite?" Holmes, applying the last of his makeup, smirked. "The Vale thrives on spectacle, Watson. A seance promising Vane's return is irresistible, threatens their secrecy. The Hierophant will come, if only to destroy the ledger's copies. By dusk, the Lyceum buzzed with an invited audience reporters, theatre patrons, and a scattering of Lestrade's men disguised as toffs and tradesmen. The stage was set with a velvet-draped table, the serpent chalice at its centre, and the vanishing cabinet looming behind. Holmes, as Madame Alara took the stage, his voice quavering with feigned mysticism. "Ladies and gentlemen," he intoned, "tonight we call Alistair Vane from the beyond. His spirit lingers, tied to this relic." He gestured to the chalice, its serpent crest glinting. The audience murmured, some skeptical, others enthralled. Watson, in the wings, watched the crowd, his revolver hidden beneath his coat. Lestrade's men, stationed at the exits, signalled readiness. The lights dimmed, and Holmes began a chant, his words nonsense but delivered with conviction. The cabinet's door creaked open, and a ghostly figure Vane, projected by memoras, appeared, its form wavering in a haze of smoke triggered by the hidden vials. Gasps rippled through the audience, but Watson's eyes caught movement in the stalls, 3 figures in dark cloaks, their faces obscured, slipping toward the stage. "Holmes," he whispered into a prearranged signal wire, "they're here." Holmes, maintaining his act, raised the chalice. "Speak, Vane, reveal your truth." The projected Vane's voice, amplified by a hidden phonograph, echoed, "The saffron veil betrayed me. Their secrets are in the ledger, hidden here." The cloaked figures froze, then surged forward, knives gleaming. Watson pulled the smoke lever, flooding the stage with thick clouds, as Lestrade's men sprang into action, tackling the intruders. Chaos erupted, screams from the audience, the clash of steel, the crack of gunfire. Holmes shed his disguise, revolver drawn, and dove into the fray, protecting Vane as he retreated to the cabinet's hidden compartment. A tall figure in a black robe, the Hierophant, emerged from the smoke, his voice a snarl. "Vane, you fool, the veil is eternal." He lunged for the satchel, left deliberately on the table, but Holmes intercepted, grappling him to the floor. The Hierophant's hood fell, revealing a face Watson didn't recognize, a scarred man with a theatrical cadence, not Crowley. "You're not the leader," Holmes hissed, pinning him. "Where's Emily Harwood?" The man laughed, blood trickling from a cut lip. "You'll never find her. The veil's reach is beyond you." Lestrade's men subdued the remaining veil members, and the audience, realizing the danger, fled in panic. Watson hauled the Hierophant to his feet, searching him for clues. A folded note fell from his robe, scrawled with an address: Warehouse 17, Sublevel, Secure Room. "Emily," Watson said, handing the note to Holmes. Holmes nodded, his eyes blazing. "The docks, now, Lestrade, hold these men, Vane, with us." They raced to Warehouse 17, the fog parting like a curtain as their cab sped through the night. The iron door was ajar, fresh footprints marking the dust. Holmes picked the sublevel lock, descending into a damp, stone-walled chamber lit by a single lantern. Cages lined the walls, most empty, but one held a figure, a woman, pale and thin, her eyes wide with fear. "Emily," Vane cried, rushing to the cage. He fumbled with the lock, using the crescent key from his dressing room. The door swung open, and Emily Harwood stumbled out, clinging to him, her voice a sob. "Alistair, you came." Holmes examined her, noting bruises but no fatal injuries. "Miss Harwood, what do you know of the Veil's leader?" Emily's voice was weak but clear. "The Hierophant, not the man you caught. Another, always masked, voice like a stage actor. He runs everything smuggling, blackmail. They kept me to control, Alistair, said I'd die if he betrayed them. Watson's heart sank, but Holmes's resolve hardened. We have the ledger, the copiers, and now you, Miss Harwood. The veil's crumbling, but the true Hierophant remains. We returned to Baker Street, planned the final strike. They escorted Emily and Vane to safety, Lestrade's men guarding the warehouse. At 2-1B, Holmes spread the ledger's copies, cross-referencing the note's address with known veil sites. The Hierophant's theatrical flair points to someone in Vane's orbit, he said. Not Crowley his alibi holds, but someone. Close, manipulating the strings. Watson bandaged Emily's wrists, his mind on the captured Vale members. The man we caught, he's a decoy, isn't he? Holmes nodded, lighting his pipe. A lieutenant, not the king. The return of the magician has shaken the Vale, but the final act is the Hierophant's unmasking. Tomorrow we hunt him, and Emily's testimony will seal his fate. The fire crackled, the ledger's secrets a beacon in the fog. Alistair Vane had returned. Emily Harwood was free. But the saffron veil's shadow lingered, and Sherlock Holmes was poised to bring down its master. Chapter 12. The final act, the Grand Opera House, loomed over the city like a sleeping giant, its spires piercing the twilight sky. The magician, Elias Varnholt, stood at the edge of the plaza, his dark cloak billowing in the evening breeze. His sharp eyes scanned the ornate facade, its golden filigree glinting under the gaslights. The saffron conspiracy, a shadowy cabal that had woven its tendrils through the city's elite, was about to face its reckoning. Elias had spent months unraveling their schemes, decoding cryptic messages, trailing cloaked figures through fog-choked alleys, and piecing together the truth behind their plot to seize control of the city's trade routes. Tonight, it would end. Elias adjusted the silver ring on his finger, its faint glow pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. The ring, an heirloom from his mentor, was more than a keepsake. It was a conduit for the subtle magics he wielded, a tool to bend light and shadow to his will. He felt the weight of the moment, the culmination of every step that had led him here. The heiress, Lady Seraphine, had entrusted him with her family's legacy, a network of merchant guilds that the conspirators sought to dominate. The lady in mourning, Clara, had revealed the personal cost of their ambition. Her husband, a guildmaster, had been murdered to silence his dissent. Even Ilias's rival, the cunning illusionist Marcus Dre, had joined him, their old enmity set aside. In the face of a greater threat, the plaza was eerily quiet, the usual crowds of theatergoers absent. The conspirators had ensured the opera house was empty tonight, a perfect stage for their final move. Elias's informants had uncovered their plan, a clandestine meeting to seal their alliance with a foreign syndicate, one that would flood the city with illicit goods and tip the balance of power. The mastermind, known only as the Saffron Veil, would be there, their identity still a mystery. Elias's pulse quickened. He had one chance to end this. He slipped through a side entrance, his footsteps silent on the marble floor. The opera house's interior was a labyrinth of velvet curtains and gilded columns, its air heavy with the scent of polished wood and old secrets. Elias moved like a shadow, his ring casting faint glimmers to mask his presence. He climbed a spiral staircase to the upper balcony, where he could survey the auditorium. Below, the stage was lit by a single chandelier, its crystals scattering light across the empty seats. A long table stood at the center, surrounded by figures in saffron-colored cloaks. Their voices were low, but Elias caught fragments of their discussion: trade routes, bribes, a coded reference to the shipment. At the head of the table stood a figure taller than the rest, their face hidden by a hood. The saffron veil Elias's grip tightened on the balcony railing. He had suspected many councillors, merchants, even a disgraced noble, but the truth remained elusive. He needed to get closer. Marcus appeared beside him, his own cloak blending with the shadows. "You're late," he whispered, his voice laced with his usual smirk. "I've already scouted the lower levels. There's a trapdoor beneath the stage, likely their escape route." Elias nodded, grateful for Marcus's pragmatism despite their rocky history. "We need to disrupt their meeting without triggering a panic. If they scatter, we lose the veil." "Agreed," Marcus said, his fingers tracing the outline of a small glass orb in his pocket. "An illusionist's trick. No doubt. I'll create a diversion." "You get to the stage." Elias descended the stairs, his movements swift and precise. The conspirators were deep in debate, unaware of the intruders. He caught more of their words now. "The guildmasters are compromised. The shipment arrives at dawn. The city will kneel." His blood ran cold. The shipment wasn't just good, was a weapon, something to hold the city hostage. He had to act now. Marcus's diversion came without warning. A burst of light erupted from the back of the auditorium, followed by a chorus of spectral voices echoing through the hall. The conspirators froze, their heads snapping toward the disturbance. Elias seized the moment, vaulting over the stage's edge and landing silently behind the table. The saffron veil turned, their hood shifting to reveal a glimpse of pale skin and sharp cheekbones. A woman's voice, cold and commanding, cut through the chaos. "Find the intruder, now." Elias didn't hesitate. He raised his ring, channeling its power into a pulse of light that shattered the chandelier above. Crystals rained down, scattering the conspirators as they dove for cover. Elias lunged for the veil, but she was faster, slipping through the trapdoor Marcus had mentioned. He followed, plunging into a narrow tunnel lit by flickering torches. The tunnel twisted beneath the opera house, its walls damp and lined with ancient carvings. Elias's ring glowed brighter, guiding him through the dark. He could hear the veil's footsteps ahead, quick and deliberate. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. At its center stood a crate, its wooden surface marked with a saffron sigil. The shipment, the veil stood beside it, her hood thrown back to reveal a face Elias knew all too well. Lady Seraphine's cousin, Isolde, a woman he had dismissed as a grieving recluse. Her eyes burned with defiance. "You're too late, Elias," she said, her voice steady. "The city's fate is sealed." Elias stepped forward, his ring casting a soft glow across the chamber. "Why, Isolde? You're part of the guild. Why betray your own?" Her laugh was bitter. "The guild abandoned me when I needed them most. My brother died because of their greed, their corruption. The saffron veil will rebuild this city, stronger, purer. The shipment alchemical fire will burn away the rot." Elias's mind raced. Alchemical fire was a volatile substance, capable of leveling half the city. He couldn't let it leave this chamber. "You'll kill thousands," he said, stalling as he scanned the room for options. "Innocent people, not just the guilty." Isolde's expression wavered, but her resolve held. Sacrifices are necessary. Marcus emerged from the shadows, his orb glowing faintly. "She's not wrong about the guild's corruption," he said, his tone deceptively light. "Burning the city won't fix it. He tossed the orb, and the chamber filled with a blinding illusion of flames, disorienting Isolde. Elias seized the moment, tackling her to the ground and binding her wrists with a cord from his cloak. The crate remained, its sigil pulsing faintly. Elias approached it cautiously, his ring detecting traces of magic woven into the wood. A trap. He turned to Marcus. "Can you contain it?" Marcus grimaced. "I can try," he began, weaving an illusion around the crate, a shimmering barrier to dampen any explosion. Elias worked alongside him, using his ring to unravel the magical wards. Sweat beaded on his forehead as the sigil flickered, threatening to ignite above. The sounds of footsteps echoed. Seraphine and Clara had arrived with the city guard, alerted by Marcus's earlier signal. The conspirators were being rounded up in the auditorium, their plans crumbling. Elias focused on the crate, his ring burning hot as he dismantled the final ward. The sigil faded, and the crate fell silent. Isolde glared from her restraints, her defiance unbroken. "You think this ends it? The saffron veil is bigger than me." Elias met her gaze. "Then we'll keep fighting." He turned to Marcus, who gave a weary nod. Together they escorted Isolde to the surface, where Seraphine and Clara waited. The heiress's face was a mask of grief as she saw her cousin's betrayal, but she stood tall. "The guilds will rebuild," she said, "without blood." Clara, her mourning veil lifted, placed a hand on Elias's arm. "You've given me justice. Thank you." The opera house stood quiet now, its stage empty once more. Elias looked out at the city beyond, its lights flickering like stars. The saffron conspiracy was broken, its leaders exposed, its weapon neutralized. But Isolde's words lingered. The veil was bigger than one person. Elias knew this victory was only a pause, a moment to breathe before the next shadow rose. As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Elias stepped into the plaza. Marcus joined him, his usual smirk softened by exhaustion. "Not bad for a night's work," he said. Elias allowed himself a small smile. Not bad at all. The city stirred, its people waking to a new day, unaware of how close they had come to ruin. Elias adjusted his ring, its glow fading as the first rays of sunlight touched it. The curtain had fallen, but the stage was never truly empty. There would always be another act. The plaza filled with the sounds of life vendors calling, carriages rattling, children laughing. Elias walked among them, his cloak blending with the crowd. He had no illusions about the challenges ahead, but, for now, the city was safe. His legacy, like the opera house itself, stood firm, a beacon against the dark. And as he vanished into the morning light, he carried with him the certainty that he would return when the next curtain rose. Chapter 13. Dawn over the horizon, the city of Valthorn stretched beneath a sky streaked with the soft pinks and golds of dawn, its spires catching the first light like the tips of a crown. Elias Varnholt stood atop a low hill overlooking the harbour, his cloak stirring in the gentle morning breeze. The weight of the previous night's battle in the opera house lingered in his bones, but the city's quiet pulse soothed him. The saffron conspiracy had been shattered, its mastermind, Isolde, now in the hands of the city guard. The alchemical fire that threatened to consume Valthorn was safely contained, its crate locked away in a fortified vault beneath the Guildhall. Yet Elias knew peace was fleeting. Isolde's final words, "The saffron veil is bigger than me," echoed. In his mind, a warning of shadows yet to come. Below, the city stirred. Fishing boats bobbed in the harbour, their sails unfurling as they prepared for the day's work. Market stalls opened along the cobblestone streets, vendors calling out to early risers. The scars of the conspiracy were invisible to most, but Elias saw them in the guarded glances of guildmasters, the hushed whispers of dockworkers, the empty seats in council chambers where traitors had once sat. Valthorn was healing, but it would need more than time to mend. Elias adjusted the silver ring on his finger, its faint glow dim in the daylight. The ring had saved him countless times, its magic a quiet ally in a world of deception. He turned, his gaze to the Guildhall, a sprawling stone building at the city's heart. Lady Seraphine, the heiress to the merchant guilds, had called a meeting there today. She had vowed to rebuild the guild's trust, to root out the corruption that had allowed the saffron veil to take hold. Elias had promised to stand by her, but he felt the pull of the horizon, the restless urge to seek out the veil's remaining threads before they could weave a new trap. He descended the hill, his boots crunching on the gravel path. The city's sounds grew louder as he entered its streets, blending into the crowd. His cloak, dark and unadorned, drew no attention, but his presence was felt by those who knew him. A baker nodded as he passed, a subtle gesture of thanks for a city still standing. A street child, wide-eyed, tugged at his sleeve before darting away, leaving a crumpled note in his hand. Elias unfolded it, recognizing Clara's elegant script, "Meet me at the old fountain. We must speak." Clara, the lady in mourning, had been a quiet force in the fight against the conspiracy. Her husband's murder had driven her to seek justice, and her courage had earned Elias's respect. He changed course, heading toward the fountain in the city's eastern quarter. The streets grew narrower here, lined with ivy-covered townhouses and small shops. The fountain, a relic from Valthorn's early days, stood in a quiet plaza, its marble basin cracked but still flowing with clear water. Clara waited there, her black veil replaced by a simple grey shawl. Her face, once etched with grief, now held a quiet determination. "Elias," she said, her voice soft but steady, "I feared you'd already left." "Not yet," he replied, leaning against the fountain's edge. "What's this about?" She glanced around, ensuring they were alone. The guard found papers in Isolde's estate, coded messages, like the ones you deciphered before. They mention a name, the Weaver, someone higher than Isolde, perhaps the true head of the Saffron Veil. Elias's jaw tightened. The Weaver, a new piece in the puzzle, or perhaps the one who had been moving the pieces all along. Where are the papers now? With Seraphine at the guild. She's called a council to discuss them, but I don't trust everyone there. Not yet. Elias nodded, his mind already racing. The Guildhall was a nest of ambition, even without the conspiracy's influence. "I'll go. Stay safe, Clara," she smiled faintly. "I'm done hiding, Elias. I'll be there too." They parted ways, Elias heading toward the Guildhall with renewed purpose. The building's grand entrance was flanked by stone lions, their eyes seeming to follow him as he climbed the steps. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of wax and parchment. Servants bustled about, preparing the council chamber for the meeting. Elias spotted Seraphine at the far end of the hall, her auburn hair catching the light from a stained glass window. She wore a deep blue gown, the color of the guild's crest, and her expression was one of quiet resolve. "Elias," she said, approaching him, "thank you for coming. We have much to discuss." She led him to a side chamber where a table was strewn with papers. The coded messages Clara had mentioned were there, their symbols familiar but more complex than before. Elias traced a finger over one, his ring glowing faintly as he sensed the magic woven into the ink. "These are warded," he said. "Whoever wrote them didn't want them read. Can you break it?" Serafini asked. Given time, he met her gaze. Clara mentioned the weaver. "What do you know?" Seraphine's lips pressed into a thin line. "Little, but enough to worry. The messages suggest the weaver is abroad, coordinating with foreign allies. If a soldier was their pawn, they're already planning their next move." Elias felt a chill. The saffron veil's reach was longer than he'd feared. We need to know who they are, and we need to act before they do. The council meeting began an hour later, the chamber filled with guildmasters, merchants, and city officials. Elias stood at the back, his presence unnoticed by most. Seraphine presided, her voice steady as she outlined the conspiracies, defeat, and the steps to rebuild. She spoke of transparency, of audits to uncover hidden ties, of a new charter to protect the guilds. The room listened, some nodding, others exchanging wary glances. Elias watched them all, his ring pulsing faintly as he scanned for signs of deceit. Clara sat near the front, her grey shawl a stark contrast to the guildmaster's finery. She caught Ilias's eye, her expression unreadable. Marcus Dray was there, too, lounging in a corner with his usual air of detached amusement. Their alliance, forged in the opera house, was still new, but Elias trusted Marcus's sharp mind, if not his motives. As Seraphine presented the coded messages, the room grew tense. "These were found in Isolde's possession," she said, holding up a sheet. "They point to a figure known as the Weaver, someone who may still threaten our city. We must uncover their identity." A guildmaster, an older man with a silver beard, stood. Lady Seraphine, with respect, a soldier's treachery was her own. "Dragging us into another witch hunt risks fracturing the guilds further." Others murmured agreement, but Clara rose, her voice cutting through the noise. "My husband died because we ignored the signs. We cannot afford to do so again." The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling over them. Elia stepped forward, his cloak parting to reveal the ring on his finger. "The messages are warded with magic," he said, his voice calm but firm. "They're not the work of a lone traitor. The Weaver is real, and they're not done." The guildmaster bristled, but Seraphine raised a hand. "Elias has proven his loyalty. We will pursue this lead discreetly. I ask for your support." The meeting adjourned with uneasy consensus, the guildmasters dispersing to their own agendas. Elias lingered, studying the messages with Seraphine and Clara. Marcus joined them, his fingers drumming on the table. "You're stirring a hornet's nest," he said, his tone light but his eyes serious. "The Weaver won't take kindly to being hunted." "Good," Elias replied. "Let them come." The next days were a blur of work. Elias spent hours decoding the messages, his ring burning as he unraveled their wards. The symbols spoke of a network spanning cities, of ships carrying more than goods, of a plan to destabilize Valthorn's allies. The Weaver's name appeared only once, in a phrase that chilled him. "The Weaver spins, and empires fall." Clara proved invaluable, her knowledge of the guild's inner workings guiding their search. She uncovered records of unmarked shipments, payments to unknown accounts, and a pattern of disappearances among minor officials. Seraphine, meanwhile, rallied the loyal guildmasters, securing funds and guards to protect the city's key points. Marcus, ever the wild card, slipped into the city's underbelly. returning with rumors of a secret meeting planned at the old lighthouse on the coast. Elias and Marcus set out for the lighthouse under cover of night, their cloaks blending with the shadows. The structure stood on a rocky cliff, its beacon long extinguished. The sea roared below, its waves crashing against the stones. Ilias's ring glowed faintly, sensing magic within the lighthouse. "They're here," he whispered. Marcus nodded, pulling a glass orb from his pocket. "Ready when you are." They crept inside, the air damp and heavy with salt. The lighthouse's spiral staircase creaked under their weight, leading to a chamber at the top. Through a crack in the door, Ilias saw figures in saffron cloaks, their voices low. One stood apart, their face hidden by a mask woven with golden threads. The weaver, Elias, signaled Marcus, who tossed the orb. It shattered, filling the chamber with a blinding illusion of fire. The figures scattered, shouting, as Elias burst through the door. He tackled the weaver, pinning them to the floor. The mask fell, revealing a man Elias didn't recognize, sharp-featured, with eyes like polished obsidian. "You're too late," the man hissed. "The plan is in motion." Elias bound his wrists, his ring pulsing as he sensed a trap. The chamber's walls shimmered, revealing hidden runes. "Marcus, get out," he shouted, dragging the weaver toward the stairs. The runes flared, and the lighthouse trembled, stones cracking as magic surged. They barely escaped before the structure collapsed, the sea swallowing its ruins. The weaver laughed, unperturbed. "You can't stop it," he said. "The shipment sails tonight." Ilias's heart sank. Another shipment, alchemical. Fire, or worse. He and Marcus raced back to the city, the weaver in tow. At the Guildhall, Seraphine and Clara were waiting, their faces grim. "We found the ship," Seraphine said. "It's docked at the northern pier, ready to sail." They moved quickly, gathering a small force of guards and loyal guild members. The pier was quiet, the ship's crew unaware of the approaching threat. Elias boarded first, his ring guiding him to the hold. There he found crates marked with the saffron sigil, their contents radiating a faint heat. Alchemical fire, enough to burn a city. Marcus worked his illusions, distracting the crew as Elias and the guards secured the crates. Clara and Seraphine joined them, their presence steadying the group. The weaver, now in chains, watched with a smirk. "You think this is the end?" he said. "The veil is everywhere." Elias ignored him, focusing on the crates. He used his ring to dismantle their wards, each one more complex than the last. Sweat dripped from his brow as the final sigil faded, the crates falling silent. The guards moved them to a secure vault. The ship's crew arrested as dawn broke. The city was safe again, but the victory felt hollow. The weaver's words echoed Isolde's. The saffron veil was a hydra, its heads endless. Elias stood on the pier, watching the sunrise. Seraphine approached, her expression weary but hopeful. "We've won a battle," she said. "Not the war." Clara joined them, her shawl fluttering in the breeze. "We'll keep fighting," she said, "together." Marcus, leaning against a crate, gave a mock salute. "Count me in, for now." Ilias looked at them, his allies, his friends. The city stretched before them, its people waking to a new day. The guilds were rebuilding, the conspiracy's roots exposed. Seraphine would lead with wisdom, Clara with courage, Marcus with cunning, and Elias, he would keep moving, chasing the shadows until the veil was gone. A festival was planned, a celebration of Valthorn's resilience. The plaza filled with music and laughter, lanterns glowing against the night sky. Elias stood at its edge, his cloak blending with the crowd. A young girl offered him a flower, her smile bright. He accepted it, tucking it into his pocket. As the festival began, Elias slipped away, his gaze on the horizon. The weaver's ship was gone, but others would come. The saffron veil was out there, spinning its web. Elias adjusted his ring, its glow a quiet promise. He would find them. The curtain had fallen, but the city's story and his own was far from over.